All right, it is 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 2nd of September 2025, and so I am declaring this Future Melbourne Committee meeting open. I welcome councillors, management and members of the public attending tonight's meeting, both in person and virtually. We are meeting on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. We govern the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung peoples of the Kulin and pay respects to their elders past and present. We acknowledge and honour the unbroken spiritual, cultural and political connection they have maintained to this unique place for more than 2,000 generations. We accept the invitation in the Uluru Statement from the Heart and are committed to walking together to build a better future. This meeting is being streamed live and the recording will be published on Council's website by close of business tomorrow. The unconfirmed minutes of this meeting will also be available from the Council's website as soon as practicable. I request that all mobile phones be turned off or to silent for the duration of the meeting. No apologies have been received, I'm very pleased to say. We move on to agenda item 2, disclosure of conflicts of interest, and if any councillor has a conflict of interest in relation to a matter to be considered by a committee, please disclose the type and nature of your interest prior to the consideration of that item. Moving on to agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. I call on a councillor to move a motion adopting the minutes of open meeting number 14 held on Tuesday the 19th of August. Thank you, Councillor Gladys Liu. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. We declare that carried unanimously. We move on to agenda item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. And I ask councillors whether there are any matters from the previous meeting that any councillor wishes to raise. No, that is good. All right, we move on therefore to submissions and correspondence. And the following submissions have been received in accordance with Council's governance rules. I'm going to read out the names of those people who have corresponded with us or who wish to submit this evening. If your name has not been called out and you have registered to submit on a particular item, please holler out and we will ensure that you will get your chance to speak. So, in relation to agenda item 6.1, TPM-25-4 for 17 to 31 and 58 to 64 of Digital Drive Docklands and an adjacent road reserve, we have a request to speak from Sophie Malakelis. In relation to agenda item 6.2, planning permit application TP-25-5, 48 Mora Street, Parkville, the request to speak from Travis Finlayson and from John Lynch. And we have items of correspondence from James Litchfield, Travis Finlayson and John Lynch as well. In relation to agenda item 6.3, ACDC celebration, we have a request to speak and an item of correspondence from Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum. In relation to agenda item 6.7, proposed travel by Lord Mayor to C40 World Mayors Summit and COP30 and Bloomberg Philanthropies Local Leaders Forum 3rd to 5th of November 2025. We have a request to speak and an item of correspondence from Chris Thrum. In relation to agenda item 7.3, notice of motion, Councillor Dr Olivia Ball, Westgate Tunnel Impacts. We have requests to speak from Mary Masters, who will be joining us via Zoom, and Beck Roy, who is also will be submitting via Zoom. We have items of correspondence in relation to that item from Ryan Angus, the North and West Melbourne Association, Mary Masters, Beck Roy and Stephen Harcher. So, have I missed anyone there? Good. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee, and it's the intention of the committee to stick to that time limit. A bell will ring at the completion of 2 minutes, signalling that you have 1 minute left to conclude your address. A second bell will sound to signal the time allocated to you has finished. We now move on to agenda item 5, public questions. A 15-minute period will be provided at the beginning and end of this meeting for members of the public to ask questions. Members of the public may either submit public questions in writing or register to ask a question in person or live via audio link. Questions should not be greater than 90 seconds in duration, and I remind members of the public that this is not the time to make submissions. Submitters will be invited to address the committee at the time of the relevant agenda item is being considered. As at 10 a.m. today, there have been 7 written public questions received, 3 of which will be asked in person. I note that in reading out these questions, we are not attesting to the veracity or factual nature of any statements made. I will now call on Councillor Raphael Camillo to read out 2 questions as Safety and Cleaning Portfolio Lead. Over to you, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So the question is from Edward Liu. And after the events on the 31st in the city, having friends and family who were verbally abused by white supremacists for being Asian, the city has become unsafe for us. What is the City of Melbourne doing to ensure neo-Nazis are not giving platform in your city and treating this as a serious threat to public safety? So, the City of Melbourne prides itself on being diverse, caring, and friendly community. We are saddened to hear you and your family were abused on Sunday, Edward, and this is not acceptable for us. We deplore the actions that we were taking by some on the streets of Melbourne on Sunday, and we will continue to work and support Victoria Police to do whatever we can to bring offenders to account and minimize the opportunity for this violence reoccurring. We will continue to promote respect and tolerance, and we are taking every action to ensure Melbourne remains a safe and a welcome place for everyone. Additional background information here, I would like to mention to everyone that the Council plays a very important information to support the Victoria Police in instances like that. We saw on the weekend our City Safety, Security and Amenity Branch assist Victoria Police, include our security team, local laws officers, and our safe city cameras operators. Thank you. So,
Thank you for that. But before we move on to the next question, I would just like to add some comment to make the point that the events of the weekend do not define Melbourne as a city. We are one of the world's most inclusive and tolerant cities. I think we're the most successful multicultural city in the world, and all forms of racism are absolutely vile. And if you want any proof that we are not a racist city and we're an inclusive city, you only need to look at the councillor group sitting here before you who were elected through the democratic processes of our city, and you'll see an extraordinary diversity of cultural backgrounds here. When the people had the opportunity to speak through our democracy, they elected city leaders in all shapes, sizes and cultural backgrounds as well, and that's something that I am very, very proud of as Lord Mayor. Back to you, Councillor Camillo.
we have another question from Callan. The question is, noting that Dr. Ball's Instagram post, Melbourne City Councillors will move a urgent motion condemning all the violence prepared yesterday. Will the council or staff A, cooperate fully and go out of his way to look at all violence caught on Melbourne City Councillors' CCTV cameras and give to Vic Paul? B, recommend common law assault charges instead of common assault charges if the film indicates that the 3 criteria are met. C, if the council or staff will recommend common assault charges to Vic Paul, office or public prosecutors, or just reach out to victims of violence on Sunday. Can this be done before council appropriates monies to go to see other cities of the world and their problems, tending to these cities' problems before jet setting off would be a better look. D, when councillors are overseas representing Melbourne soon, do they know how they will explain Sunday to people curious about Melbourne? And E, can the mayor conceive of the anti-hate task force is a part of being expanded to include people who are concerned hatred, violence, and scoundrelry, and becoming the all too common vibe in the city of ours. Thank you for all your public service. That was from Callum. He didn't put his family name. So, based on a little bit of the previous answer that I provide, so we deplore the actions that were taken by some of the streets on Sunday, and we will continue to work and support Victoria Police to do whatever we can to bring offenders to account and minimize the opportunity for this violence reoccurring. We will continue to promote respect and tolerance, and we will taking every action to ensure Melbourne remains a safe and a welcome place to everyone. So, Victoria Police are actively investigating the events and incidents that occur on Sunday. Victoria Police have requests safe city cameras footage on incidents that support the investigation. And it's not for councillors or council to recommend what Victoria Police charge people with, as they are well-trained and they are the experts in the area, supported by strong prosecution area. So, but we doing day by day, every day since this new council, we working very hard to ensure the city is safe, and that's a very important topic for us. As 2 weeks ago in the council plan, one of the main topics, it is safety. Thank you, Colin, for your question.
And Councillor Camillo, I might just add to your comments, and in particular the reference to myself as Mayor being a member of the Premier's Anti-Hate Task Force. I am pleased to be serving in that role, saddened that we even have to have an anti-hate task force, but I want Edward to know the absolute seriousness that I take the responsibility of serving on that task force. It is the case that the task force was sent up in the shadow of the arson attack on the synagogue in East Melbourne, but its remit goes beyond anti-Semitism and that form of racism. Sorry, I've got... Sorry. The remit of that anti-hate task force goes beyond anti-Semitism and that form of racism to cover other forms of racism and indeed violence and prejudice against other groups in the community, such as the LGBTI community. So it has quite a broad remit, but it all is about stamping out hate and making us a city of tolerance and a state of tolerance, inclusiveness and love. Back to you, Councillor Camillo.
Lord Mayor, and just to reassuring one of the questions where when we go into overseas, how we gotta explain that. We gotta be work every day in here, and we're not gonna be just talking. We gotta taking actions, and we take our actions in our council plan. And I invite everyone to go and read some of the things we propose to improve the safety of the city of Melbourne. And consultation is open at the moment if anyone would like to see. Thank you. To you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Camillo. I'm now going to invite Jake Land to ask a question. Jake, your question should not be greater than 90 seconds, and a bell will sound a signal. The time allocated to you has finished. I believe a roving mic is going to be brought to you. Jake?
Fitzroy Gardens?
No, that's the second one.
This one here, acknowledgement of country. Lord Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors, I would like to ask the following question, will Council add the following wording to the existing preamble to the Acknowledgement of Country? We further acknowledge our first fleet settlers and all those who came after and contributed to shaping this nation from Stone Age to one of the most prosperous and progressive nations in the world. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, shall I take this question?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Council's acknowledgement of country is guided by principles of respect, inclusion and recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of this continent and its waters. The current wording reflects this commitment and aligns with best practice across local government reconciliation frameworks and our obligations under the Local Government Act of 2020. Acknowledgements are intended to respectfully recognise traditional owners and the First Peoples of this land who have maintained continuous cultures for over 65,000 years. The inclusion of acknowledgement of country has been a commitment of this council since its first Reconciliation Action Plan in 2006 and all those plans adopted since in consultation with the public. The acknowledgement refers specifically to the traditional custodians of the land on which this municipality is located, that is the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong Boonwurrung peoples, and is not intended to summarise all aspects of Australian history. Its purpose is to honour traditional custodianship and the enduring connection to country. Council does not propose to include references to broader historical narratives in the acknowledgement of country, as doing so would detract from its primary purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Ball. Jake, I understand you may have a second question. Do you wish to ask that now?
Thank you. Our second question. Yesterday, I took my little dog Lucy for a walk in Fitzroy Gardens, as we often do. Fitzroy Gardens is a world-class park of which Melburnians can be proud and due to its history, heritage listed. This question is in regards to what was a vacant, dilapidated restaurant building situated within the park. Sometimes last year, a sign was placed in front of this building advising of planned minor alterations. And I emphasize the word minor. Earlier this year, hoarding was placed around the building. I watched this building over a period of days being completely demolished, except for four concrete posts holding up the roof of the main part of the building. Yesterday, I found the hoarding removed and, to my horror, observed an unbelievable eyesore, even unsuitable for an industrial area. A low-level addition was built, presumably to contain a kitchen and toilets. The roof of this building is visible from three directions and is covered in an array of visible metal ducting and fan enclosures. I asked the council to hold to account whoever was responsible for this horrifying monstrosity, and will the council order rectification forthwith? Also, does the council consider this construction work that has been done minor alterations? And if the public are paying for this construction, what was the cost? Thank you. Just to clarify, I do have some pictures in case anyone is interested. Oh, you've got, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jake. I'm happy to respond to this question if a councillor does not wish to jump in. So thank you for the question, Jake. What you saw there was the new restaurant that is being opened by Vue de Mond's Hugh Allen. For those who don't know, Hugh is one of Australia's most decorated restaurateurs, and I think what he's done with Vue de Monde is nothing short of world class. And that magic is being brought to the Fitzroy Gardens with the Jaeger restaurant, which he is opening there. The building that you were referring to has been designed by the architect John Wardle. He would be one of Australia's most decorated architects, certainly one of the most well-known and respected architects here in Melbourne. And I understand, it's been a real labour of love between John Wardle and Hugh Allen in creating a dining experience for visitors to this restaurant, which will be unlike anything Melburnians have ever experienced, particularly given the park setting which the new restaurant is in. Now, all of this has been subject to debate and deliberation and a vote here at Council. In the previous term of Council, the Council went through an extensive EOI process to work out who was best placed to take on this project and this facility. And as a result of all that work, it was Hugh Allen who was chosen, and then subsequently John Wardle as an architect. So don't fret, Jake. There is actually something extremely exciting coming in the Fitzroy Gardens, and it's going to be an award-winning dining experience that I'm sure all Melburnians and indeed visitors around the world who come to Melbourne will be able to enjoy. Councillor David Griffiths, did you want to add to that? All right. Thank you. Yes, thank you. David Thompson has advised me that the 15 minutes for public questions has expired. I do note that we have a number of other questions pending, so I think we will extend the time. Do I need to put a procedural motion seeking an extension to that time? David? Yep. Okay, well, I'm going to move a procedural motion which people can see on the screen, that the future Melbourne Committee resolve to extend public question times for 15 minutes. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll put that motion to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Sorry, Councillor Camillo, are you supportive? Oh, okay. I'm going to take that as a positive vote, and so that is carried unanimously. So we now continue with our questions, and our next question is from Chris Thrum, who tonight is sporting a Tigers scarf, even though the Tigers, well, I'm not going to go there, am I? But I am going to heartily welcome Honorary Councillor Chris Thrum to the lectern to ask his question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I can say that the women's team is a very dynamic AFLW women's team for the Richmond Football Club, providing great experience for the Richmond supporters. I'd like to thank councillors and Lord Mayor for that procedural motion that was just happened. Much appreciated. This question is in regards to a press release, and a statement was issued by the Country Fire Authority, the CFA, on Monday, this 1st of September. And they quoted the Chief Officer, Jason Heffernan. And the situation is the CFA is very concerned about the preparedness of the Victorians are placing on the upcoming fire season. Through their experience, the more seasoned managers are concerned about the lack of attention to detail in preparing properties for the upcoming bushfire season. They feel that people are being very nonchalant and not really stepping up and preparing their properties now, which needs to occur. My question for the Lord Mayor, with the insight and the wisdom that's there on the council and the management team, what kind of advice would you give to Melburnians and Victorians in regards to the upcoming fire season and the concerns of the CFA?
Councillor David Griffiths, I'm just wondering if through your environment portfolio you wish to comment on fire risk for the upcoming summer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was not expecting that, but I'm more than happy to do so. And Chris, you obviously raise an important question that we both need to consider here in the City of Melbourne and more broadly. I will get management to respond more concisely to the matters you raise, but obviously one of the things that we've been considering in our council planning process is how we address things like climate mitigation, and of course that's a vital area when we're talking about the prolonged and changing fire seasons that we're experiencing in Australia. And I'm sure that our team, through Dean Robertson and others who deal with safety and with Councillor Camillo looking over this as well, will make sure that we are doing all we can to make sure that people in the City of Melbourne are going to be ready for what will be another hot summer, bushfires being one of the threats that we face from that, and also the many other programs that we have in place to help people deal with long, hot summers in their own homes as well. But it's a very valid point that you raise, and hopefully just by having this discussion here tonight, we'll have drawn people's attention to it as well.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. And I might also invite Councillor Camillo, who is our lead on safety and cleaning, to also add his observations.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So thanks for your question, Chris. Yeah, we are fortunate in the City of Melbourne that our bushfire is very minimal risk. But we are fully aware of the risks of the fire to any dwellings and standalone on a multi-story building, because we live in close to big cities in here. And I encourage all the residents, owners, and owner corporations and business to have a fire plan. And the Fire Rescue Victoria website has a fantastic information on their website under Home Fire Safety Booklet, which outlines the basic fundamentals of a fire plan, including working smoke detectors, battery fire safety, to name a couple. Daylight savings commence on the 5th of October, and FRV recommends that it's a great time to check the batteries in your properties and your smoke detectors, and I encourage of all residents to use this as a reminder to review your fire safety plan. I hope I answer part of your question, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Thank you, Chris, for your question. I will now read out a question we have received from Carl Hessian as infrastructure portfolio lead, and I thank Carl for his keen interest in matters at the City of Melbourne. Carl asks, on 1 September 2025, Participate Melbourne was updated with the following text. Before the tunnel opens, we've worked with DTP to roll out a range of interim measures in local streets across North and West Melbourne to help ensure these neighbourhoods aren't used as shortcuts by motorists. The intersection of Adderley and Dudley is not on the list of street closures, but the roundabout exits from Hawke and Adderley are. Why did Council and DTP feel it necessary to block off circulation within the suburb, in caps, as opposed to blocking off an exit from the suburb, in caps? Wouldn't it make sense to fully close off the Adderley Street exit into Dudley, given this is already half closed, rather than block Hawke and Adderley? Now, I might see if Rick Quasek wishes to begin our response on this question, given your deep involvement in the TAP and what it means for this part of our city.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the question. In relation to the treatments, they essentially have been designed to try and minimise the potential rat running as the Westgate tunnel opens, and the treatments have been set up in such a way that they are interim treatments, and the intention is to monitor traffic flows as the tunnel opens, and with the monitoring, should it be required, there would be modifications to the treatments as it plays out. So it is common for traffic patterns to have to settle for a period of time when a major traffic treatment is undertaken, and it can take up to around 6 months for those traffic patterns to settle. So the intention with this particular one is that the interim treatments are there as a starting point, and any traffic movements and issues will be monitored over the next 6 months following the opening. The specific feedback has been passed on to the Transport Amenity Program team, and the 2 sites mentioned will also be monitored to ensure that there are no detrimental traffic movements in that location.
Thank you for that, Rick. And I do note that later on in tonight's meeting, we're going to have a notice of motion from Councillor Dr Ball about the TAP project. I presume you will be speaking at that time, and I know there's a diagram I'm hoping will be able to be put up to explain the most recent round of announcements relating to intersection changes. I think that would be very helpful for people to see that, as well as get your further explanation on the detail of the most recent round of investments, interventions under the TAP. So I'm taking that as a nod and a positive. Good. All right. We will move on to, I will now call on the Deputy Lord Mayor, Roshena Campbell, to read out a question as the Planning Portfolio Lead.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a question from Kate Kennedy of the Kensington Association. Kate writes, on 18 March, the committee resolved to receive a report to the committee at the earliest opportunity, providing options to acquire the drainage land abutting Moonee Ponds Creek, identified as essential for flood management and for providing green open space for the current and projected local population growth. That decision was not contingent on Planning Scheme Amendment C417. The Macaulay Structure Plan, consistent with the earlier Arden-Macaulay Structure Plan, designates this land as essential public open space regardless of whether it is tied to a development contribution plan. On 6 May, we were informed that the matter would be scheduled to be considered at FMC in July, prior to the draft council plan being considered in August. It is now September. The draft 10-year financial plan has been released with no allocation of funds from the open space or development contribution reserves, and the draft council plan offers no indication of when this land will be secured. Could you please advise when the issue of Macaulay public open space will return to council for consideration, specifically regarding the VicTrack-owned land both north and south of Macaulay Road? Further, can you confirm that securing the drainage land north of Macaulay Road is not contingent on Planning Scheme Amendment C417 and that discussions with VicTrack are progressing in line with the structure plan and past council decisions? Firstly, thank you, Kate, so much for your question. You are a passionate advocate for your community, and I will go so far as to add that your passion is certainly matched by councillors on this council. I won't name them, but you should rest assured that this is something that is being pursued passionately by a number of councillors. In answer to your question, the Macaulay Structure Plan and its associated permanent draft development contribution plan identify the drainage land site as a future drainage open space, serving a dual function: flood mitigation and open space provision. The structure plan and the DCP are being implemented into the Melbourne Planning Scheme via Amendment C417. The matter of Macaulay public open space will be considered by Council later this year or early next year. We appreciate your frustration about the delay, Kate, and can I say there is significant commitment and work being done by both councillors and officers to make that happen as soon as possible. In relation to your questions about the land north and south of Macaulay Road, firstly dealing with the land north of Macaulay Road, we continue to work with Melbourne Water on this as a priority. The land acquisition for drainage land will be considered when Melbourne Water's updated flood modelling and drainage strategy is confirmed. This work will inform the required drainage infrastructure, as well as the physical extent on the site and its configuration or the design of the open space. Further, this work will also inform a future funding mechanism for the construction of drainage infrastructure projects in Macaulay and Arden. And to give you a sense of why that is so important, the draft permanent DCP includes drainage land acquisition at a total cost of $20.9 million. And then the open space embellishment, often referred to as Macaulay Terraces, is then at a total cost of $15.285 million. Management has been exploring some temporary solutions alongside this longer-term drainage land acquisition. And so in respect of your question of the land south of Macaulay Road, Council has applied for a community lease over parcels of VicTrack land south of Macaulay Road that would enable a continuous connection between Macaulay Road and Lloyd Street. We are awaiting the outcome of that application. Once received, we will commence concept designs for a linear park. Thank you again for your question, Kate. We will continue to persevere on this, and we look forward to bringing it back to FMC later this year or early next year. Back to you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you, Kate Kennedy, for her activism out there in Kensington. All right, we have 2 minutes left under our extended public questions this evening. Any final questions from the community? No. In that case, I will move on, and I'm going to actually move a procedural motion to alter the order of business this evening. So I'm going to request Liz or the team that a motion be put up there. This is just some minor adjustments to the sort of second half of the meeting. So for those people waiting here for the first items, don't panic. And I have floated this with my councillor colleagues. So I am now moving a procedural motion that tonight's agenda be changed or altered to accord with the ordering that is up there on the screen. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm now going to put that procedural motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That is carried unanimously. And so we will now proceed in the order that is now been agreed. Having agreed that, we now move on to reports from management and general business. And I'm going to call on the Deputy Lord Mayor, Rashina Campbell, to assume the role of Chair of the meeting. Over to you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. There are 7 reports from management and 3 items of general business tonight. The first item is agenda item 6.1, TPM 2025-4, 17 to 31, part of, and 58 to 64, Digital Drive, Docklands and Adjacent Road Reserve. I am going to request a presentation on this item, and I call on Anne-Marie Dracos, Acting Head of Statutory Planning, to make a brief presentation.
Good evening, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor, fellow councillors, and to everyone here this evening. Before the committee tonight is a planning permit application, as you can see on the screen, for land in Docklands, Digital Drive, encompassing also an adjacent road reservation. Council's been invited to make comment to the application by the Department of Planning and Transport on behalf of the Minister for Planning. Just want to make note from the outset, Council is neither a decision maker or a referral authority for this particular application. If I could ask for the next slide, which just gives us an aerial view of the subject land so we can appreciate the part of Docklands that we're in. The particular part of land we're most interested in this evening is the land shown in blue, and it is got an interface to the north with Dudley Street and to Harbour Esplanade to the west. If I could ask for the next slide, which shows the building envelopes. Again, we're concerned with stage 2 this evening. A staged approach is being taken to the delivery of development, use and development in this part of Digital Harbour. And last year, the committee had before it the stage 1 approval that is shown in blue on the image on the screen. Tonight's focus will be on stage 2. On the next slide, what you can see is some building envelopes depicting, again, stage 1 approvals. The yellow is illustrating what's already under construction, and stage 2 is depicting what is being assessed by officers and proposed by the applicant on the western interface. Now, before I dive into the next slide, I just want to make a comment about the relevant planning considerations. We are in the Docklands Zone Schedule 5. There are a number of overlay controls, but the one that I want to highlight to the committee tonight is the Development Plan Overlay number 6. The reason that one's most relevant is because there is a development plan attaching to that planning control. It's called the Digital Harbour Development Plan, and it provides the relevant planning decision-making framework for decision makers. the clause in the planning scheme that governs development plans tells us very clearly that a permit granted must be generally in accordance with the development plan. In other words, if a proposed use and development is not to be generally in accordance with the development plan, a planning permit cannot issue. So now if I can have the slides in relation to the development plan and just very quickly speak to the fact that this is the site layout per the development plan. Probably important to note it's a 2011 development plan dating back to an earlier version that goes back to 2002. So this is the layout, and again, just reminding stage 2 is the matter that we're considering, or the part of the land to which we're considering the permission sought. And on the next slide, I'd like to show the land use mix that is anticipated by the development plan. Now, the development plan is 117 odd pages, and we don't purport to say that these 2 slides effectively limit the consideration, but for presentation purposes, they are key. And they are key because this slide, for example, does a lot of work in explaining the land use mix that is anticipated. Our focus this evening is on the part of the land that is shown in the red with a 100-metre building or tower and 60-metre tower anticipated by the development plan. The low-rise commercial and a mix of mixed-use commercial residential is what is anticipated as part of the land use proposal or output. If I can ask to go to the next slide, keeping in mind what we saw by way of the development plan anticipating a 100-metre building on the building to the left, which is building 4. What we have by way of a proposal here is a 116-metre tower, and on the right we have a development that is proposing a tower of 93 metres, which is, we suggest, departing from what the development plan anticipated for the tower component, which was 60 metres. In addition, what you'll notice in this particular render, which is one of many architectural renders and representations that encompass the particular development, but you will also see a podium, a rather distinct solid building mass. The development plan anticipates 2 separate building forms. Over the page or over the slide, and we have this detailed in our report to the committee tonight, really is prepared to just, quantitative level, provide a snapshot of what we say in the planning department are key departures from a development plan that is to be generally in accordance with, but as you can see, building form is substantially different, heights are different, you have a very significant departure when it comes to gross floor area. This particular proposal puts a lot more emphasis on residential, which is commended in normal circumstances, but in circumstances where a development plan envisages a lot more commercial, it does present an issue, as does the car parking, which is substantially different. But we do commend the applicant on the public infrastructure delivery as is proposed. The last thing I wanted to say in relation to the staging, which is about the departures being significant. They're significant also in the sense that there was a human services provision anticipated as part of the stage 1 proposal, which hasn't been delivered in stage 2, and we just think that's important for councillors to be across. In our officer assessment, we've elaborated on why we say these departures are significant and why we say they're not generally in accordance with the development plan. On my next slide, we've got some matters that we say should the minister assess the proposal as being generally in accordance with the development plan. Our report seeks to make a number of recommendations that the department might take on board and request the applicant to resolve prior to a permit issuing. They are an amendment to Tower 4 to reduce overshadowing for the future Central Park, which is a key piece of public realm and which ought not be overshadowed to the extent proposed at the September equinox, to separate the building podium into two parts, to provide that very important open-air pedestrian thoroughfare that has been foregone in the design response as a consequence of that one podium and two tower design response. Other consequences that flow from the design response include an activation at the streetscape level, particularly along the Harbour Esplanade interface, which has opportunity for improvement, and we would put to the applicant to take us up on that invitation, together with also the fact that the human services provision is absent, as is an offering in the use component for low-rise commercial. And lastly, but not leastly, there are a number of precinct-weaned screening measures that are being proposed as necessary to make the conditions acceptable. And our report goes to the fact that we say they're not acceptable, and we'd ask the applicant to work with the department to revisit that response so no screening is required in the future public realm. And finally, on the last slide, we have to assist the department, as the planning department prides itself on doing a series of conditions. We just want to preface that by saying that they're not an exhaustive list on this occasion, but what we have done is sought to offer our expertise and internal knowledge to suggest that some conditions along the lines of addressing and amending architectural drawings, working hard to resurrect and address the wind concerns that officers have, landscaping, waste and sustainability management plan conditions as well, together with a number of important other conditions to secure the park delivery, the city infrastructure, which goes to the extension of Digital Drive, for example, and footpath delivery, as well as some important environmental audit conditions to make sure that the land uses can be safe before occupation. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Do councillors have any questions? Officers? No. All right. I now call on Sophie Malakellus, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Sophie, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. My name is Sophie Malakellus and I am a Senior Town Planner at Contour Consultants. We act on behalf of the permit applicant in relation to this ministerial permit application which has been referred to the City of Melbourne. Firstly, I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to this agenda item, which is critical to the delivery of the broader Digital Harbour precinct and urban renewal within the municipality. Through the commencement of Stage 1 works and this proposal for Stage 2, our client has demonstrated their firm commitment to the realisation of the vision for Digital Harbour, including the delivery of meaningful housing growth, public infrastructure and commercial activation. I'd also like to extend our thanks to the planning officers for their report that is before you tonight and the ongoing constructive working relationship. We acknowledge that planning officers prepared their report with an expedited timeframe owing to our client's obligations with Development Victoria. We have reviewed the report and taken on board key issues raised by planning officers. It is fair to say that there are matters of disagreement between the permit applicant and officers. The planning officers have put forward a series of permit conditions that our client is receptive to, and ultimately our client is committed to working with the Council and the Department of Transport and Planning to ensure the delivery of the vision for the precinct. To touch on some of the matters identified in the report as key departures from the development plan, I'd emphasise the following. This part of the precinct has been previously subject to planning approvals. The maximum building height for these previous approvals were assessed on their merits and their consistency with the development plan. The maximum building heights proposed in this instance are commensurate with the previous approved outcome. The extent of overshadowing to the Central Park will ensure it remains usable and functional throughout the critical hours of the day. We respectfully disagree with the methodology adopted in the officer report in the assessment of yield and the mix of uses. In this regard, we submit that the application is entirely consistent with the yield expectations of the development plan. The proposal provides an increased quantum of employment-generating floor area to appropriately activate this portion of the precinct. The residential yield for this portion of the precinct accords with the approved development plan. The proposal will deliver a new weather-protected pedestrian link between the corner of Harbour Esplanade and Digital Drive, which is a highly responsive outcome having regard to the adverse wind conditions that currently exist in this portion of the precinct. As these final buildings will essentially complete the perimeter of the precinct, it is our view that a precinct approach to the management of wind is critical, and these items are being actively worked through in collaboration with the City of Melbourne and Development Victoria. Thank you again for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Sophie. I might kick off. My first question is in relation to the provision of human services, be that a school or something else. Are you able to shed any light for the committee on the applicant's intentions in respect of that?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In this respect, we would say that the location of community services such as a school is a matter for the state government to determine. I understand that the location of the school in this instance has been redirected to Newquay, and that's a matter for the state government to determine.
Is there any intention on the part of the applicant to provide something else in the way of that would meet the definition of human services if not a school?
We would submit that the land use mix provided as part of stage 2 is in accordance with the expectations of the development plan.
Do any other councillors have any questions? No? All right. Thank you very much, Sophie. I'm now going to seek to have a motion put on the screen, and I'm going to seek an alternate motion to be put on the screen. Thank you. I am going to move that motion, and I'm looking for a councillor to second it. Thank you, Councillor Lei-Lu. And I'm now going to speak to that motion. The ministerial planning application before us is a proposal for a multi-storey mixed-use building over 2 towers, which includes 436 apartments and 279 residential hotel rooms. The applicant is Digital Harbour Developments Proprietary Limited, and the owner of the land is Development Victoria, the architects of Fraser and Partners. And the estimated cost of the development is $225 million. As you've heard tonight, this proposal is the second stage of development within the Digital Harbour Development Plan. Now, that development plan was last refreshed back in 2011. And as many in this room would appreciate, much has changed in Docklands and Victoria since that date. But the City of Melbourne recognises the enormous ongoing potential of the Digital Harbour Precinct. It is a place that can contribute strongly to the role of Docklands, but also to its broader role in delivering much needed housing in the City of Melbourne and Victoria, as well as jobs and new public places for our community. However, the development plan that guides this area is now more than 14 years old. Although amendments have been sought to it, no amendment has been sought in respect of the development plan for this application. Having noted that, this alternate motion seeks to address that, and 8.1.2 seeks for the Minister to seek an amendment of the development plan, having regard to the considerations outlined in management's report before any planning permit is issued. As you've heard tonight from our planning officers, the scale of height, massing and yield being proposed significantly exceeds the development plan, though we appreciate that is a matter of some contention and not a matter that the applicant agrees with. However, our role is to make sure that what this committee approved, noting the Minister is the ultimate decision-making here, is compliant with the planning scheme. And while we are broadly supportive of the vision for Digital Harbour, particularly this outstanding opportunity to deliver housing at scale, we must also ensure that development is compliant with the planning scheme. In our view, 8.1.2 will ensure that is the case. We're also very cognisant of the impacts on the broader area as a result of this development, and the conditions proposed by management in attachment 3 of the report at a minimum seek to address some of those, noting the limited time that our officers have had to complete this work, and I thank them for their outstanding work, particularly in those circumstances. I don't intend to address those conditions completely, but I do want to touch on some that I think will be of particular interest to the community. The first is a wind mitigation strategy to avoid the situation that none of us want to see in any part of Docklands, that is the risk of creating a wind tunnel in Docklands. That would be an unacceptable outcome. There are also conditions in relation to shadows to the public realm. I note at 2 p.m, there is estimated to be only 24% of the park that would be unshadowed. This could be addressed through amendments to Tower 4. I also have heard tonight about the provision of human services as part of this stage. I have to say, for my part, I am really disappointed that it will not include provision of a school. Those of us who are familiar with the pressures faced by our Docklands community, a primary school that is at bursting point and a high school that is much needed. I certainly hope that is a human service that is provided, but I certainly am still of the view that human services being delivered in Docklands, if not a school within this precinct, is something that would be of huge benefit to the community in the City of Melbourne. But in my view, 8.1.1 is the bare minimum of conditions that we would seek the planning minister provide any planning permit be subject to. And that is why it is our recommendation that any future permit, should the minister decide to issue one, be subject to those conditions at a minimum. And I have to say I'm delighted to hear tonight that the applicant is responsive to those conditions. With these updates and these conditions, and with an amendment of the development plan, Digital Harbour can become a truly exceptional place. For those reasons, I am happy to move this motion. And over to you, Councillor Leigh-Lewis, seconder.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think you covered most of it. I think for me, and while I was not here probably for when South Bank was created, but this reminds me very fairly of that. And for me, there are a lot of issues already in Docklands, and I think having a lot of things that we're trying to put forward addresses some of those issues, and I hope that the applicants do consider them. I understand, we are in a place where we do need homes, and City of Melbourne is probably one of the best places to have that, especially going, we are pro-development and we do want to see things going, but not at a way that, let's just say history has taught us many lessons, and places where in City of Melbourne that we have actually seen that has actually done properly is something that we need to learn from. And I think this is one of the key things that we need to do. I think some of the things we do ask for, which is the human service, the overshadowing, and all these other things, are not so outrageous. I think it is expected of the community, and it is definitely one of people who have suffered a lot in Docklands, and I see the reduction in the commercial and also retail. The Central Pier was one of the used to draw in 1 million people per year, and now it's shut. And yet now we're even reducing even more commercial outputs into that area. And so I really do hope that Development Victoria do look at Docklands as a whole. And I hope that we can work together. I think we do. Our team has done an amazing job, as we've seen the original motion. But nevertheless, I think we need to work together on this, and there are some bare minimums that we would look for. But happy to support the amendment.
Thank you so much, Councillor Leigh-Lewis. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Yes, Councillor Dr. Ball.
I hope I haven't missed the opportunity to ask a question, if I may, of Anne-Marie.
You may ask a question at any time, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Given that this proposal exceeds the development plan so significantly, is there scope for requiring a portion of affordable housing in the development?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Ball. I think that it's important to remember that it's a relevant planning consideration to think about what the development plan does and does not require. So whilst it might be a request that could be put and, offered or a volunteered response by the applicant, it still doesn't respectfully take away from the fact that the proposal needs to satisfy the current obligations and requirements of the development plan to at least a generally in accordance with test.
I quite agree. But given that we, rather than refuse the permit, the amended motion is now to grant it with a recommendation to amend the plan, and the minimum conditions, but there is not a condition concerning affordable housing requirement. And is there a reason you haven't gone in that direction?
There is not a condition requiring affordable housing. The reason there is no condition is that there's no ability in the scheme to require, like there would be a public benefit, for example, in the DDO 10.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Did you also wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Dr. Ball? Do any other councillors wish to speak to the motion? In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? That has passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move to agenda item 6.2, Planning Permit Application TP 2025-5, 48 Mora Street Council, Parkville. I am going to seek a short presentation on this item, so I'm going to call Anne-Marie Dracos, Acting Head of Statutory Planning, back to the podium to make a brief presentation.
Thank you again, Deputy Lord Mayor, and good evening again to councillors and everybody this evening. The second application that planning has before the committee tonight is for an address in Parkville, 48 Mora Street in Parkville. In this case, council is the responsible authority and decision maker. Over the next slide, if I could, you'll see an aerial image of the subject land. It's a corner allotment, as is clear. It has a frontage to Mora Street, which is to the south, and an interface to the west with Wimble Street, immediate residential abuttal with number 46 Mora is to the east, and it abuts a laneway called Butler Lane to the north. On my next slide, we have some site photos to give you a feel for existing conditions. Left to right is that Mora Street frontage I was referring to. Middle or central photo shows the Wimble Street elevation in its existing condition, and the image on the right is the northern interface from the rear lane. In terms of the next slide, if I could, this is depicting the heritage context. So one of the key planning permit triggers on this occasion is the need for planning permission not only to demolish but to construct additions to a single dwelling, which is the proposal that is before the committee tonight. The existing heritage context in this part of Parkville is that the site is a significant heritage building graded pursuant to the incorporated document Heritage Places Inventory, March 2020. The majority of the neighbourhood, as is apparent, is in a heritage overlay. The orange is depicting contributory and parts of our streetscape across Mora, and parts of Wimble are significant from a streetscapes perspective as well. Over the next slide is what is proposed. Perhaps just before I speak to what is proposed, it's just important to recognise that the land is zoned neighbourhood residential zone, and a planning permit is required under the zone in terms of an assessment under Res Code, but the primary considerations under the planning assessment will focus on, as they have in the report, on heritage and the amenity implications that have been raised, understandably, from some objecting parties. What you've got on the screen here is a photo or a render depiction, if you like, of the existing fabric to the right, which you would have seen in the site photos that we shared earlier. That is a restoration that I'll come to speak to in a moment in terms of some very specific detail that's been offered by the applicant here to restore the heritage fabric and bring that part of the building back to a high standard. Obviously, the applicant's also seeking to increase floor space provision, and to the left of the screen you can appreciate that there is a double-storey extension which is on the northern end. Partial demolition is proposed, that is including a component to the rear a partial demolition of some fencing and a series of other demolition works to do with a small removal of roofing and some fencing removals. On my next slide, if I could, show you some ground floor, upper floor and roof plan depictions. The proposal is an extension at ground floor, as you can see, across the upper floor and retention of the roof on the roof plan, just with some skylight breaks. On the next slide, this is in elevation form, so we've not put every single elevation up there, and apologies for the busyness to some degree of that western elevation. But you can see in conjunction with the render that we showed earlier, you've got the existing fabric and levels of work being undertaken to the intricate features of the existing significant heritage building. And then you do have, we don't deny, a modern and very contemporary design response to the left. In terms of that, though, we think that that response has been carefully considered by the architect and the applicants' representatives. There has been adjustments through the planning process to retain more heritage fabric. That comes in the form of the deletion of a terrace, a rooftop terrace that was previously proposed atop of the roof form. This was a key matter that was raised by objecting parties and to which, to their credit, the applicant has responded by formally amending their proposal to delete the roof terrace and retain as much existing roof form as possible to facilitate the design response. Critically, Council's Heritage Advisor has provided detailed feedback, and I am happy to say is very comfortable with the extent of demolition and very supportive of the architectural design response and treatment to the existing heritage fabric. I think it's important for the committee to know that policy requires the additions to be distinguishable, to therefore avoid the reproduction or imitation of heritage fabric. Sometimes that's not clearly understood, but what we've tried to achieve, or the applicants tried to achieve, is recognition of that policy response and providing a contemporary design which intentionally, as you can see, particularly from that western elevation, sits lower than the heritage building and clearly draws on a material and colour palette that distinguishes the new fabric from the old. This permission provides an opportunity, an important opportunity, to see to the restoration of a significant heritage building. Such an outcome, we say, will be secured by permit conditions, if one is to issue, which include the requirement to provide and adhere to a conservation works plan. The applicant has, or the application rather, we acknowledge with 24 objections has garnered a relatively high level of interest in the community, and we acknowledge the matters raised by residents objecting to the proposal, which obviously include heritage concerns and issues, but they also do raise legitimate residential amenity concerns. I can tell the committee that the planners have looked at the proposal carefully, and we acknowledge that the proposal seeks variations to Res Code standards, particularly in the context of permeability and site coverage, wall heights, and there are a minor level of overshadowing implications. We don't shy away from that, but as we detail in the report, we've come to the conclusion, having taken into account the relevant considerations that we're obliged to consider in the planning scheme, that the proposal does meet the various objectives of the Res Code standards. When you acknowledge the site context, the constrained site conditions, the existing character of the neighbourhood, and an assessment that any proposed amenity impacts, in our view, against the tests in the planning scheme and the objectives of Res Code, are not unreasonable in the circumstances. Thank you to Deputy Lord Mayor. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
You so much, Anne-Marie. Do councillors have any questions? No? Thank you so much. I now call on Travis Finlayson, who has requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter. Travis, I remind you to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thanks for the opportunity to present to the Future Melbourne Committee. I'm Travis Finlayson from Ratio Consultants. I've got Dean Dyson, the project architect, here tonight, and I've also got Lee and Josette Bryan, who are the landowners and who want to redevelop this heritage property. They are excited to become, hopefully, part of the Parkville community. They're a family of 4, and they want to look after this heritage asset and redevelop it sensibly to allow for family accommodation in a well-located location. It's not an insignificant investment when you're talking about purchasing a property like this and then spending the time and effort to renovate it. There's a construction cost of around $1.7 million. Restoring a heritage property, it's a big undertaking for a family, but I think in this particular application, one that's been sensibly undertaken and respectful of the heritage place. The extension itself is modest in height, 7.4 metres. It's sited lower than the retained period fabric. Being a corner site, there's an importance to protect what only presents to Morris Street, but also the side street, being Wimble Street, extending along the frontage, and this particular proposal does that successfully. Clearly distinguishing the old, retaining it, restoring it, and then proposing a modern contemporary addition to the rear that is clearly distinguishable. Amenity impacts have also been carefully considered in terms of overlooking, limiting overshadowing. There's no additional shadow to 46 Morris Street until 2 p.m, and that's minor at 2.5 square metres additional shadow. It's high quality architecture that responds to a heritage context, as well as mitigating any unreasonable amenity impacts. The process has been very much collaborative with council officers. The officer recommendation is a strong endorsement of support. Council's heritage officer also supports the proposal. Our client deleted the previous roof terrace to respond to objection concern, to respond to council's heritage officer and the council officers themselves. Overall, it's a well-considered proposal. It will restore a heritage dwelling to its original form, a heritage building that's been sitting dilapidated somewhat for many, many years. There's an opportunity here to really restore it and bring it back to its former glory. It's an appropriate and respectful addition to the streetscape, and it will also allow a family of 4 to move into a newly refurbished period form and become part of the Parkville community. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Travis. Any questions for Travis? No. Thank you. I now call on John Lynch. Is John with us in person? Yes. Thank you, John.
Madam Chair, do you mind putting up a picture of the Wimble Street frontage of this building?
Sorry, that was part of the presentation that we've just had. Is that what you're requesting? Could we get that presentation back up?
Perhaps the colour. This is the one. Yes.
Thank you.
I'm writing or giving this submission with a bit of a deep heart because I've met the owners and welcomed them to Parkville, and I'm very impressed by their proposals to renovate that dear old building. The questions are related to the frontage to the heritage listed street Wimble, and of course the compliance with HO4. Looking at the proposal, the addition is a major issue. Bold and modern, the facade faces Wimble Street, which has the same classification as Morra, both heritage listed, level 1. This facade consists of vertical metal cladding. Have a good look. Vertical metal cladding with a concave profile and a wall of glass blocks in a heritage street. The report says these vertical metal claddings and glass bricks are evident in surrounding areas. There are no glass brick walls in South Parkville. There are no metal cladding facades visible in level 1 streetscapes. I have to say some WAGs refer to this as looking like containers. The addition is bold, eye-catching expression of modern architecture, but bears minimal relationship to the existing streetscape. Look, South Parkville HO4 has taken 70-odd years to develop, and I understand that to come to this area requires additional diligence. And there's a bit of a yoke you have to wear if you're going to go into building something in addition to Parkville. But finally, you have to put perhaps your own desires behind you and try with the community to hold on to this area. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
So much, John. I might ask some questions of Anne-Marie or one of our planning officers in relation to the matters you raise, which in particular compliance with HO4, the modern facade of the extension and the use of glass bricks and metal cladding and where they are used elsewhere.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. In relation to the last point, I think our report refers to the use of or the presence in the character of glass, not necessarily glass bricks, and other materiality. For example, the cladding. The cladding will be apparent elsewhere, but we recognise there may not be a striking contemporary addition in the exact precise way. As I touched on in the presentation, this is what the heritage direction is, that you don't mock the existing heritage fabric that exists, and in terms of extending that fabric that you just replicate, it is, as I suggested earlier, sometimes a bit of a misconception in the community that it is the heritage advice and the heritage policy to do something different so that the heritage fabric of old can stand alone and the new edition can sit itself to be quite distinct.
And compliance with HO4, is there anything further you want to say about that specifically?
Well, look, in terms of compliance with HO4, HO4 speaks to, the permit triggers of the heritage overlay, and in relation to, and we've set this out in our report, the existing statement of significance and the what we term as the BIF sheet recognises that the response is, just going to bring that up, just give me 1 second, on page PDF 23 of 48 of our report, we've referred to the proposal or the extraction from the BIF sheet, recognising that that the proposal is restoring that front importance, the importance of the building as it's proposed or as it's shown in the particular BIF. So we say that the proposal is sympathetic to HO4.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Unless any other councillors have a question, no? I'm now going to let you resume your seat, and I'm now going to seek to have a motion put up on the screen. Thank you. I will move that motion, and I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lei-Lu. And I will now speak to the motion. The planning application before us tonight relates to the site at 48 Moore Street, Parkville. The applicant seeks planning permission to partially demolish the existing building, construct a 2-storey rear extension and undertake external alterations and external painting. As you've heard tonight from our officers, there has been a quite significant number of objections, and I want to thank all of those who have taken the time in particular to make a submission. I have certainly looked at those in detail, as I'm sure my councillor colleagues have, and to those who have come tonight to present to us in person, we particularly thank you for doing that. Can I also note that our officers have taken these submissions into account, and I am pleased to move the motion tonight that a permit issue subject to the conditions in attachment 3, noting that they do, in my view, address some of the matters raised by the various objectors. When assessed against the relevant provisions of the scheme, in my view, this project will enhance the appearance of a very prominent corner building in a beloved part of the city of Melbourne, South Parkville. Many of you may be familiar with this site. It's a historic 1870s corner shop and residence that perhaps is ready for its next chapter. And I am pleased that the applicant has committed that the heritage parts of the corner shop will be retained, but in addition to that, that the intricate decorative features that have defined the building for generations will be carefully repaired and restored. And I am hopeful that that has the outcome of bringing this building back to its beauty. Importantly, this application achieves an appropriate heritage outcome that will not result in unreasonable off-site amenity impacts. As the assessment sets out in our Office's planning report, this application is consistent with the relevant provisions of the Melbourne Planning Scheme. I'd like to say something briefly, though, about heritage specifically, which we have heard much about tonight. The focus here is not on replacement, but preservation and shining the spotlight on what is a significant part of the City of Melbourne's history and highlighting that historical significance of the building while providing that contrasting, that modern facade extension that doesn't seek to mock the heritage of the building, but rather provide a clear contrast to it. And this proposed new building towards the back of the site, as you'll have seen in our presentation tonight, is in fact fairly modest. But importantly, from my perspective, I do hope that this breathes some life back into what is a beloved local landmark for anyone who has walked around the area, and that this will strengthen Parkville's historic fabric. I support the recommendation of our planning officers. I thank them for their work, and in my view, the permit should issue, subject to the conditions in the report. Over to you, Councillor Leilu.
Thank you, and happy to support it as well. I think one of the things that I always consider is, while heritage is important, but ultimately, without careful care and I guess investment, heritage will be lost. And I think what we have actually here is a great outcome. The fact that I've seen some really shocking and really bad heritage developments and going forward. And I think in this case, I quite like it because the fact that it's actually a restoration, it's actually keeping of its old, and it's an investment into heritage. It's acknowledging its identity and it's still keeping it. So I think we should actually respect that. I know we would talk about the new build that's behind it, but I think there's a very clear break in between. It's not like it's if you're driving a car and you're attaching a trailer, rather than on the back, there's a connector, you're attaching it straight onto the boot. It's not. It's actually, there's a clear, so I would actually say that it's actually completely new and it's not actually hindering or changing the heritage of it. Rather, it's actually, respecting it in a way that it's in the same height, material. I would say, look, I think the material is fine. I think it's acknowledging the fact that it is modern Australia. We need new designs, we need new colours, and so I do think that break is just symbolises the notion between the two, and so I do quite like how it's well designed and everything. But ultimately, I hope that this is something that there's going to be a lot of people that's going to walk in past. I think over time people will see that this is a good development. I know when people don't actually see the rendering, the visual, they probably not give approach to, but I've walked around that area a whole time. I've seen many other heritage areas as well, and the new modern, renovations on top of the heritage has actually been absolutely stunning, beautiful. We actually do it better than I think most other states and cities that we actually do. And I think this is actually keeping in line with the character and also of the era. So more than happy to support this, and I hope that in time those who object will also come to love it as well.
Thank you so much, Councillor Leilu. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No. In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise their hands? That has passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to agenda item 7.3, notice of motion. Councillor Dr. Ball. Oh, apologies. Thank you, David Thompson. We're moving on to agenda item 6.4, final concept design, North Melbourne Community Hub development. Would councillors like a presentation on this item? No. In that case, I call on a councillor to move a motion that I am hoping is put on the screen. Is that the motion? No. Is there an alternate motion? Thank you. Is there a councillor who wishes to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Liu. And I'm looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Over to you, Councillor Liu.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. So this is a very exciting project, the North Melbourne Community Hub development. Now, obviously, it started before my election, and it dated back to 2003 June, and that's when the council selected this location, 91 to 115 Melrose Street, as the site for this new community hub. The reason for that, obviously, is because the existing community hub is just not enough to provide for the growing needs of the growing community in North Melbourne. And the new design will provide 3,000 square meters hub with improved access to services and develop high quality community spaces that support the population growth. I know that because I've been to the current site to see the current community hub, and I can tell you it is just not enough to provide the services for this growing population. And I also have a very detailed updates from the officers. And here I want to pay tribute to Anthony Niels, the director for this project, and his team, and also the general manager, Rushta. So both of them have informed me very well of the project. And in September 2024, the FMC endorsed a draft concept design for public consultation. So it was properly done with consultation with the public, and we have received those information, and they have put into the final concept design, which was presented to us. Now, when I have a closer look to it, I like it very much. The only thing I thought, being a fitness instructor myself and someone who uses the stairs all the time for going up and down different levels, I feel that it is it would be a missed opportunity if we do not have the new building with a focus and a prominent and inviting feature that encourages people to use the stairs, and that will provide you with incidental physical activity. So that's why you can look at the recommendation there. We have 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, and that is to add this special attention to the design principles for this new building. The current design, is it possible to have it shown on the screen? So as you can see, when you go in, you will see the entrance is number 2 there. So you go in, you can see the lift, the 2 lift on your left-hand side, but the staircase is tucked behind and it's not really visible. Can we enlarge any more? That's right. So number two here is the entrance. So you enter and the lift is on your left. This building is 5 levels. So 5 levels, if you go to level 1, 2, 3, or even to level 5, going up the stairs is not not hard at all. And I feel that if we can have the stairs, as you can see, currently is sort of tucked behind. You really have to go and find it to use the stairs. So the point 4.3 is to put in this idea of make it more visible and welcoming. So everyone can go in and you can either choose to use the lift or you can go and take the stairs. So I'm very happy with all other design for this new building because it has put in the thought for servicing the different needs of the community, whether it is the youth, it's the multicultural communities, it's the maternity and health, and rooms for social gathering, and a very big a kitchen for people who can come in and share cooking, and also a very big auditorium. And when you see the design, you would just fall in love with it. So, with this additional attention to the staircase, I think this is just perfect for North Melbourne. So I'm very happy to commend and put forward this motion to all my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Liu. Over to you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I share Councillor Liu's excitement for the motion that we have before us tonight. And I can certainly say that if she is personally any advertisement for the taking of stairs, then everyone out there in the City of Melbourne should be doing so. We climbed 5 flights of stairs together last Friday and she left me in her wake. So it's a very good amendment that she's making to the motion here, and encourage everyone to grab at the stairs when they can. Look, it's an absolute red letter week for community facilities in the City of Melbourne with this motion before us, and of course the announcement yesterday that we have an opening date for the Kensington Aquatic and Recreation Centre, which is something that people have been waiting for in Kensington for a very long time. And as Councillor Liu said, people in North Melbourne have been waiting a very, very long time for this as well. It's been over 20 years since Council first started to think about this site, but as often is the case, the community was asking for some work to be done here even before that. So there's been a lot of bumps along the way, but it is fantastic to see the documents that we have before us tonight, see a design that is really sensitive to the needs of the community and to the environment in which it's going to be placed. And as Councillor Liu said, a big thank you to Anthony Neal, Rushta Halith and everyone from the design team who's been working out there for many months, if not years, to bring this to fruition. And to everyone who's been part of the community consultation processes that we've had. We often sit in this room and ask the community to contribute their voices and their thoughts on facilities that we're considering building. And we heard some really clear messages around this one, particularly about the toy library and some of those other facilities that Councillor Liu mentioned there. And it's been great that the team has managed to put them into the community hub in this final design concept. So I'm sure it's been the case for councillors who've been out and about in North Melbourne lately. They would have heard the community excitement about this project coming, and they can look forward now to a pipeline that will end in an exciting announcement, just like the one that we had this week for Kensington. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Dr. Guest.
Thank you, Rashina, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to note the excitement in my fellow councillors. David, I remember you telling me a couple of months ago how long this had been in the making. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we're about to deliver this, and I hope that we as a council can accept the challenge to not only deliver it on budget, but also that all 11 of us are actually able to see it at its opening before this council term is up. So well done, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. And what fantastic news for the residents of North Melbourne. I also share Councillor Liu's excitement about this coming up. And for those of you who have never been anywhere with Councillor Liu, the number of times that we have been embarrassed as councillors while she's bounded up the stairs and we've all waited for an elevator, I have lost count of. I also share your excitement in the addition of the note of the staircase, and also recognise that not just does that create incidental physical activity, but it also creates opportunities for incidental connection between people and different users within the building. Rory McNeese has, of course, been a big supporter of incidental connection through staircases within our innovation ecosystems, and I think that's a great opportunity for people within the North Melbourne community to be able to connect more with one another as well. So I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion, which is agenda item 6.4? Yes, Councillor Lou.
Happy to support it, and congratulations to the team. Hopefully, this is something that we can be. We have many proud community centres, libraries over the years, and I hope that this will add to us again demonstrating. I'm actually surprised by the lack of. I thought there was going to be a lot of people from North Melbourne who actually was going to turn up. So I don't know what the issue is, whether or not they know this or they don't. But can we, and I'm not saying adding to or whatever, but can we just make sure that we do broad discuss out and ensure that, because I know there was probably one or two that I've spoken to that was very, very keen to talk to this when it's actually been brought. But the fact that there is no one here from the North Melbourne community on something so huge and momentous, I'll just pass. I'll just leave that as a comment, and I'll let the team to follow up on, and hopefully they share our excitement and promote it as much as we can.
Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion? No, well, I might say something briefly then. As many of you will know, this is a much needed and long-awaited project, partly because our population is growing in the area, but also because the current community facilities are ageing. The community engagement about this has been extensive, more than 5,200 webpage visits, 310 surveys, and perhaps most impressively of all, over 3/4 of respondents supported the draft design. But I do echo Councillor Leilou's comments that it is important to close the loop, as they say, on that. So I would encourage our officers through the neighbourhood portal and other means to make sure all of those who are participated in this process are aware of the outcome tonight. But I'd like to thank them for taking the time to do that. They told us that they wanted flexible, practical spaces, that they wanted more greenery, and this final concept reflects those priorities. Not only does it include all of the features that Councillor Lou has spoken about tonight, it also includes an amazing outdoor area, that third space for many people who might not have it at home, an open space that could include community gardens, natural playgrounds, shaded rest areas and new trees to boost biodiversity, as well as a number of internal meeting spaces and uses, including a toy library, something that I have used many times over the years, children's play areas, quiet zones and gathering zones. And as a council, we have spoken so much about the need to address the problem of loneliness. And through spaces like this, it is one of the most important ways in which we can do that. I'm also delighted sustainability plays such a key part in the design. The building includes solar panels, recycled water use and low carbon materials. But perhaps most importantly, I want to acknowledge the role of our portfolio councillors. Councillor Lou, I know you are a first-term councillor, but I hope this project is a significant milestone of your term, one of many, and Councillor Griffiths, who has been such a passionate advocate over many years for this project. I want to acknowledge the milestone that this is, given your work and ongoing advocacy. I encourage my fellow councillors to share my support for this motion tonight, and I thank the portfolio councillors for their work. Are there any other speakers to the motion? No. In that case, yes, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I just would like to share that was one of the first projects that I got in contact because I shared the portfolio infrastructure with the Lord Mayor, and I was very happy to come to fruition. Yes, because like all these years, the community waiting there, and I was very pleased to see the height of some of the buildings and the natural light, and just coming and developing and end up in the final project. So welcome to the team. Congratulations to the team. And hopefully you can deliver that before we finish and we can see. Hopefully that's what we wish. Like, I'm not going to tell where it's going to be the final date, but thank you, everyone. And I think it was a big effort for the previous councillors, the current ones, and everyone, and a big longer years. For you, Lord Mayor or Deputy Lord Mayor, I think you want to speak a little bit on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. If there are no other speakers to the motion, I'll put it to the vote. Could all those in favour please raise your hands? I'm delighted to say, firstly, that has passed unanimously, and second of all, to hand the chair back to the Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, DLM. The next agenda item before us is 7.3, a notice of motion by Councillor Dr. Olivia Ball, Westgate Tunnel Impact. Do any councillors have a conflict in relation to this item? No. In that case, I'm going to call on Mary Masters, who requested the opportunity to address the committee via Zoom.
Excuse me, Lord Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, and if Mary can possibly wait, I'd like to ask some questions in advance of the submitters for their benefit before they make their submissions,
Yep.
given the developments that have occurred over the weekend since this motion was written and listed on the agenda. May I proceed with some questions?
Yes, that's a very sensible suggestion. Over to you, Councillor Dr. Ball.
Thank you very much, and my apologies to those kept waiting. But if I may, given the media release on the weekend from the Ministers for Transport and Infrastructure and Road Safety and the Lord Mayor, it refers to interim measures at 7 intersections to be undertaken very soon over the coming month. I take it these were approved recently, and I assume they will be 50% funded by council, these works. Can I ask, when was this decision made, and what is the total cost of these interim measures?
Through you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the question, Councillor Dr. Ball. The decision was made in June through the committee established to oversee Transport Amenity Program initiatives, the Central City Transport Committee, and the cost of the initiatives is in the order of $3.5 million.
Correct in my assumption that council is paying for 50% of that?
That's correct.
Thank you. Will these interim measures be informed by the additional traffic modelling referred to? That's a reference to the third quarter CapWorks report we received in June?
Yes, they will. Yeah, the modelling was commissioned in collaboration between Department of Transport and Planning and the City of Melbourne, and the outcome of that modelling helps to inform the initiatives.
Great, thank you. I understand there was a community information session held last week, and local residents were told that these interim measures will prevent private vehicles from turning off Spencer Street into either Rosslyn Street or Drybrough Street. We don't have the map up. Are these measures going to reinforce the arterial role of Spencer Street and encourage more through traffic? Is that the aim?
It's a very good question. Before you answer it, Rick, can I suggest we please put up the map which has been circulated to councillors, but I think is worth sharing with the public as well. I know there is a lot of interest in these works. There it is on the screen. Thank you.
Terrific. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's fine.
Yep.
So the interim works and works planned for 2026 on Hawke Street are really aimed to redirect and direct the Westgate Tunnel traffic to the preferred arterial road network, being Dryburgh Street and the western end of Victoria Street and King Street. Planning to the transition of Spencer Street from an arterial road to a local road, as was recommended, will continue in 2026 as we go through that planning process, and that will be in conjunction with Department of Transport.
Good, because the West Melbourne Structure Plan, as we know, has the objective of downgrading Spencer Street from an arterial road to a local road while keeping King Street as the main arterial. So in your opinion, will these interim measures to these 7 intersections make it easier or harder for this objective of downgrading Spencer Street?
They will be consistent with the intention to downgrade Spencer Street in line with the structure plan.
Tremendous. Thank you very much. do we have sufficient and accurate baseline data about the current traffic movements in North and West Melbourne with which we'll be able to compare future traffic movements after the opening of the tunnel in December?
Yes, we do, and we're, together with the Department of Transport, geared up to monitor any increase in traffic and impacts of traffic, and the interim treatments are really there to help manage that, should it occur.
Sure, thank you. So in relation to this additional traffic modelling you've cited, you've just said earlier, I think, that was developed in collaboration between Council and DTP, the Department of Transport.
Yes, that's correct.
So to confirm, it's not modelling by Transurban?
No, it's not.
It was created by the department?
No, it was an independent consultancy that was commissioned to undertake the modelling.
I see. And modelling requires certain presumptions or inputs, and so that those, what's the word I'm looking for, assumptions maybe, were decided in collaboration with the City of Melbourne.
That's correct, yes.
Terrific, thank you. And finally, is there anything preventing our council officers who are privy to this additional traffic modelling, such as presumably yourself, from publishing these models?
We have no objection to publishing the models. We'd need to enter into an agreement with DTP, given the modelling was commissioned through both of us,
yes,
and also have it in a form that is appropriate to share.
Tremendous. So there's nothing preventing us going ahead if it is presented in a form that can be shared?
That's right.
There has been no agreement to not share it.
That's correct. We just need to agree with DTP on the form and type of information that will be shared, or the presentation of that information.
The way it is presented before publication. So we can.
That's right.
It's a reasonable assumption that can proceed.
That's correct.
And that the DTP will agree to that. That's tremendous. Thank you. That's the last of my questions, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Hopefully Mary Masters is still with us and was able to hear and see that presentation and update from Rick Kwasek. So we might now cross back to Mary. There she is. Welcome to Town Hall, Mary. You're on the big screen here. Please submit away.
Fabulous. Thanks very much for having me. The council paper before you makes it clear that the Department of Transport and Planning
Sorry, Mary, the
not.
audio is quite muffled. We're just going to see if we can get that fixed.
Is that any better? Can you hear me now?
That's a lot better. Yeah, now that's loud.
Okay.
Thank you. Please start again, Mary, and we'll start the clock again.
I apologise. Thank you so much. So the council paper before you makes it clear that the Department of Transport and Planning has not really been working with council on the local impacts for the Westgate Tunnel project. In the Premier's press release on Saturday, titled "Works Set to Begin to Keep Traffic Moving Across Melbourne," and which outlines immediate changes being implemented as soon as this coming Sunday, which will help speed up as much Westgate Tunnel project traffic across the Dynon Road Bridge and into North Melbourne and West Melbourne as is seemingly possible. Lord Mayor Rees is quoted as saying that council is working closely with the Victorian Government to deliver on what was promised from this TAP funding, and it feels simply unbelievable. In June, we learnt that 10.7 million of this 100 million TAP funding had already been spent. In the draft council budget from 25-26 budget, council committed another 8.5 million, and at around the same time, the Premier is on record as saying that around 20 million in total had already gone to the road network improvements. Now, somehow, this figure that we have been told, it has jumped to 43 million of expenditure or allocated funds from this 100 million TAP funding. If my maths is mathing, that means another 23 million has been sunk into these temporary works that we were just discussing, works that will funnel traffic off the Dynon Road Bridge and straight through our neighbourhoods. Works, honestly, that appear to mostly benefit Transurban and not local residents. All of this 43 million of TAP funding so far has been spent or allocated with no community consultation, no transparency, no traffic modelling that has been released, and seemingly no benefit to our communities in North and West Melbourne and it's appalling. I urge you tonight to support Councillor Ball's motion in full to demand full disclosure of TAP expenditure and to insist on proper monitoring and genuine consultation from all road stakeholders and your council staff moving forward. North and West Melbourne should not be treated as collateral damage for Transurban's road toll. That's the end of my submission. And then just quickly on behalf of the North and West Melbourne Association, we did have a fabulous meeting last week with a whole lot of stakeholders from Westgate Tunnel Project, Transurban and Department of Transport. And we would invite council to engage with us and come out and have a meeting with us as well. There's a separate paper on that where we invite you to come and join us and tell us about what you know and that we don't about these works.
All right, thank you very much, Mary, and thank you for all the work you do in the community in West Melbourne there. I now call on Beck Roy, who is also joining us via Zoom to speak for no more than 3 minutes. I think we saw Beck on the screen a moment ago. There she is. Welcome to Town Hall. Beck, you're on the big screen. We can all
Hi, sorry, I wasn't aware that I was on just before. Yes, I just happened to look up on my telly and I was like, oh my God. Anyway, sorry, thanks for having me.
We're a pretty relaxed bunch here at Melbourne Town Hall.
Yeah, good. So, full disclosure for transparency, I did work at City of Melbourne earlier this year and in the transport engineering team, so I was aware vaguely of this project, and this is why I'm actually aware of what's happening. It's not because of any community consultation. That's my biggest issue with the changes that are being proposed. There's been absolutely no communication with the local community about what's happening. And as Mary said, the media on the weekend said that apparently it's starting on Sunday or Monday, and there has been nothing but no letterbox drop from City of Melbourne or DTP, which is extremely disappointing. However, I'm not that surprised about it because I am aware that council officers were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement when they were discussing this traffic modelling. So I'm not sure if what Rick said just before about there's no reason that this modelling can't be released. From what I was aware, there is an NDA in place that prevented officers from speaking about it internally and probably had an impact on whether the community can be involved in any kind of discussions. I think I'm a transport planner as well, so I'm just very concerned about the changes. And I think that the Transport Amenity Fund is for amenity. And so to focus it for DTP to then rejig this and focus it on traffic flow is really concerning. That this community around here, I live right in the centre of that map. This community around here has suffered from the noise and disruption for 7 years now. And it's coming at a very late stage where DTP is clearly panicking about what they should do to mitigate any issues when the tunnel opens. But it's at the expense of the local community. I'm not necessarily against road closures or modal filters. I think part of the issue is the community is not aware of this or why it's happening, and this needs to be explained. So that's the thing that I'm really disappointed about. And it's obviously DTP is in charge of the intersections and City of Melbourne is in charge of the local roads. I'm also concerned about the changing of local roads like Abbotsford Street between Spencer and Victoria to have more of an arterial function, and the inclusion of more double turn right lanes, which don't really align with a high pedestrian area. And I think pedestrians and people moving around have really been overlooked in this in general. So I'm thankful that Councillor Ball has raised this because it is really important. And Mary mentioned there was a meeting last week. I wasn't aware of this. And I know a few people went and I heard about it later. I would have attended, but again, it's something that I think was requested by North and West Melbourne Association, reaching out to DTP for that meeting. And it's just I would have no idea about this project if I didn't work at the City of Melbourne earlier this year. So I think that there's just a lot of things, and the rush of it happening is concerning, particularly with the focus on traffic movement rather than people.
All right, thank you for that submission, Beck. And before we do move into debate, I do want to just pick up on two questions with you, Rick, that have been raised by both Beck and Mary. So you've made it, I believe, clear that the modelling and the data will be released. Can you confirm that and perhaps give us a timeline?
Yes, we would need to engage with the Department of Transport and Planning about the form of the modelling before they agree to release it. The modelling is a technical document, so it needs to be converted into a form that makes it publicly accessible. I had a conversation earlier today with Department of Transport. It would just be about agreeing on the form of that modelling before it's released.
All right, excellent, thank you. All right, let us now move into debate. I believe there's a motion that you wish to put, Councillor Dr. Ball.
That is correct.
Let's bring that up on the screen. And we're looking for a seconder for that motion. Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Back to you, Councillor Ball.
Could I, if I may, add a final clause capturing the concerns of submitters, both written and verbal tonight, wording that I've submitted to council business in this eventuality. Do you have it, or shall I read it out, or both? Fabulous. Thank you very much. That just asks management to go back and look closely at the submissions, verbal and written tonight, and make sure that every concern in therein is captured and responded to. I'd appreciate that very much. So did you second it already?
Happy to second that.
Yep. Councillor Rouse has seconded. Back to you, Councillor Ball.
Tremendous. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to everyone who's made submissions on this issue tonight. I've striven in this motion to convey some of the history in the background section for those who are interested in the notice of motion, but it's impossible to convey all of it. What I've tried to do is explain enough of the history to describe the social licence that the West Melbourne community has granted the council in 2017 and 2018, before most of us were on the council, and how important it is that that social licence continues to be respected. I wasn't on the council, and the Lord Mayor at the time was the leader of the planning portfolio, so he may recall and be able to explain this better than I can. But as I understand it, the aim of the West Melbourne Structure Plan was to improve the amenity, safety and local connectivity in West Melbourne in the expectation that population would rapidly increase. 10 years ago, the residential population of West Melbourne was about 5,000 people, and today it's about to pass 10,000. The social licence, therefore, was straightforward. Yes, the population will more than double, but there will be enough new parks to support the residential population, and the 3 state arterial roads, that is King, Spencer and Dudley, will become only 2, with Spencer Street downgraded to become a council-managed local road, and that we would work to make it pleasant, safe and accessible as a high street for this burgeoning new local community, with options, we hope, for a future tram line. That was the promise, and the quality of local streets and quantity of green open space will only improve as the population grows, and that West Melbourne will not be allowed to become a traffic sewer. That was also what the Transport and Amenity Program, TAP, was supposed to deliver. $100 million for improved streetscapes and new parks to be installed while the Westgate Tunnel was being built. And I think it's an indictment on government, both ours and the state, that in the 7 years since the Transport and Amenity Plan was announced, there has been so precious little to show for it. It's not a criticism of the extraordinary efforts taken by so many to get some traction, including through some very, very challenging times for the city and the state. But it's an acknowledgement that collectively we have failed to do what was promised within the time frame we set. Most particularly, it's a betrayal of our promise to West Melbourne residents. In my opinion, a big part of the problem here is secrecy, as we've heard from these residents making submissions tonight. Why have they not been communicated with? Why do they not know more than they do? The tunnel is about to open. And that's why I've brought this motion tonight. I'm delighted with the responses from Rick that this seems, what I'm asking tonight in this motion seems feasible and possible. The Westgate Tunnel was approved in 2017 based on traffic modelling in a publicly scrutinised environmental effects statement at the time, and that traffic modelling remains published. But the TAP has been delayed, we're told, because of Department of Transport and Planning will not approve projects that conflict with the, quote, additional traffic modelling that emerged in the past year. And this traffic modelling remains a secret. The public interest demands that the additional traffic modelling be treated in the same way as the original modelling, and it must be published. It's not good enough to say that to the community that after 7 years of delay and 3 months before the Westgate Tunnel opens, just trust us to reconsider the Hawke Street Linear Park and the Spencer Street Master Plan after the traffic has settled. We cannot possibly acquire that trust unless we explain the situation we find ourselves in honestly and transparently. So I hope that the report that will come back to this committee by the 11th of November, if this motion is carried, will go some way to repairing that trust between the West Melbourne community and government. I also hope that it will demonstrate that despite the situation we find ourselves in, so little action with so little time remaining, that we remain committed to delivering our promise in spite of that to the West Melbourne community. That is a linear park for Hawke Street, a safe, accessible, low traffic Spencer Street with active shop fronts, the high street that community needs, and enough quality open space to meet the needs of 10,000 or more residents. Please urge my colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Over to you, Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'll keep my comments brief as I think Councillor Ball covered a lot of the detail there. But on behalf of the residents of North and West Melbourne, I understand their fear and concern as expressed by the submissions that we heard earlier and also in writing. This will effectively be the biggest impact to transport infrastructure in North and West Melbourne. And I say that given the fact that we're opening up a station in North Melbourne later this year as well. This will have the impact of dumping a freeway worth of traffic into the back streets of West Melbourne. And as we've heard tonight, the residents are concerned. The residents have not been informed or well informed in their own terms. And I share those concerns as to what will happen, the impact of what we can expect to happen, and how this will deteriorate the suburb of North and West Melbourne. So I share those concerns and I support the motion on the screen because I think it's important we continue and maintain the transparency and inform our residents of what is happening, because this will impact them more than any of us in the room tonight. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Guest.
Just briefly, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to commend this motion. Of course, any call for transparency is something I'm going to support. As you know, I've been calling for it here in other respects at the Melbourne City Council, and I think the reality is that every tier of government that we go higher, the numbers only become more and more meaningful. So I couldn't do anything but support this motion. The need to be transparent, it did concern me that there may have been problems with releasing the said data. I think all the information we can get, both in costings, are relevant, in terms of traffic data is relevant. We can only make better decisions in the future if we have this information at hand, and that should be something we do as a natural course of action at the Melbourne City Council, and I would hope that the tiers of government above us would follow suit, and because we've all read the papers over many years now where that's failed to happen. So well done on this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Guest. Councillor Leilou.
I think one of the key things, if our team actually do speak with the state government, if they're saying, look, trust us and everything, it would be great if the state government actually commit a certain budget to it, so that if they actually say, well, trust us, but if there is actually saying, well, let's wait until everything is settled, then actually we can actually be saying, well, do you have the budget? do you actually have something in there? And so if they're actually able to promise something that to give comfort to the community, I think that would be great. Look, I'll leave that to the team, but I just thought, like, if you're going to say trust us, but then give no money or budget to it, then of course people are not going to believe that. But then if we're actually going to go, you know what, if they actually go, trust us, and if there is something, we have a contingency budget, we have the money behind it, I think that's actually common sense.
Can I just confirm, Rick, the $100 million budget for TAP?
Yes, Department of Transport have reconfirmed the $100 million or up to $100 million allocation. That's correct, yes.
All right, thank you for that. Any other councillors like to speak to this item? I might say a few words. Thank you, Councillor Dr Ball, for drafting this motion, and Councillor Rouse for seconding. I think it's really important, this motion, and I think it's really important that we as a council group keep a very close eye on this TAP process that we are going through. Thanks also for the reminder of the West Melbourne Structure Plan. That was indeed a fine bit of planning work done by the City of Melbourne, and you are correct, I was in the planning portfolio at that time. It was very innovative. It included things like floor area ratios and many aspects of the West Melbourne Structure Plan are being delivered and are delivering positive outcomes for that fantastic part of our city, delivering a mid-rise, medium-density suburb. And while some parts are being delivered, it is also the case that some parts of the plan we are falling short on. Probably most significantly is the one that you flagged, Dr Ball, and that is the Spencer Street, which is to be, I was going to say downgraded, but I think the better term is upgraded to a local road and a high street for West Melbourne. A wonderful high street which will rival Errol Street, Smith Street, Lygon Street, Gertrude Street, and the great retail high streets of inner city Melbourne. And that is a vision which certainly remains something that I'm focused on, and that this city must remain focused on in this term. Of course, then comes along the Westgate Tunnel project. It may be an important bit addition to the state road network. It may be an important addition to the state's freight effort. It may be that all-important, second Yarra crossing, adding resilience to our road network. But if you live in West Melbourne or North Melbourne, you are absolutely right to have concerns about what this road project means for your neighbourhood. The Westgate Tunnel is expected to carry 70,000 vehicles a day. 70,000 by 2030, and many of those vehicles are going to be ending up in North Melbourne, West Melbourne, rat running across the city of Melbourne to get to the east and get to the west. And so this TAP project is vitally important for us to stop that from occurring and preserve the livability of these suburbs, indeed the livability that we in Melbourne are famous for. Now, to date, the TAP projects have not been delivered in the way that I think was originally envisaged. And I know there has been a lot of frustration about that. Certainly, I have felt that frustration as well. We're now being told that any future decisions beyond those that were announced on the weekend will need to be subject to seeing how traffic flows settle once the road is open. And while I understand the science behind that, the logic behind that, I also want to put on the record the frustration of the community that here we are years after the TAP was announced, and we're now being told there's actually going to be further delays because we've got to wait and see what happens when once the road's open and when traffic patterns settle down. Terrific to hear this evening that there's a commitment around transparency and the release of the modelling. I know several of us councillors will be pursuing that doggedly and look forward to that data being released to a highly engaged and interested community. I also want to put on the record that not a week goes by when I am not personally on the phone to the state government at a ministerial level to try and get updates on outcomes from the TAP program. And I'm very pleased in particular to see that Hawke Street has been included in this round of TAP funding that was announced on the weekend. People who live in West Melbourne will be familiar with the changes that have happened on Roden Street. That was a controversial project. I know there was some opposition in the area to it, but now it's open. It looks fantastic, and it's a great example of what we can do at the City of Melbourne when we get in there, and green streets and green neighbourhoods. And now we'll see that sort of treatment happening on Hawke Street, and that's going to be terrific from a traffic calming perspective, stopping the rat runs, but it's also going to be fantastic, valuable new green space for West Melbourne where it is desperately needed. So that's one positive that came out of the weekend announcement. And I do think the changes to these intersections are going to be positive as well in terms of new line markings, new light sequencing, which will alter the way traffic flows through there and stop the rat runs from occurring. There's also some street changes as well in terms of stopping some, particularly some one-way directions, single-lane directions in certain areas, which I think will be positive as well. But it's not enough, and there's a lot more that still needs to come. And so here at the City of Melbourne, we will continue to work hard and get the job done and see West Melbourne and North Melbourne continue to be one of the most wonderful, livable areas of our municipality. All right, was there anything other councillors wanted to say on this item? In that case, we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm going to declare that carried unanimously. We now move on to the next agenda item, 7.1, and that is proposed travel, World Top Performing Incubator Forum, Shanghai, China. Are there any councillors that need to declare a conflict in relation to this item?
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'd like to declare a material conflict of interest as the motion relates to travel that I'll be partaking in.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse, and indeed under our new protocols on these matters, as advised by David Thompson, councillors do now exclude themselves when these matters are being considered and they are involved in the travel. We'll just give Councillor Rouse a moment to leave the room. All right, I don't think we need a presentation in relation to this item, and so I am happy to move the motion that I'm going to ask be put on the screen. There it is. I'm looking for a councillor to second this motion. Councillor Leilu, did you wish to second this one? Thank you very much, Phil. And I'm now happy to speak to this item and welcome other councillors to contribute as well. Look, I'm very happy to move this motion to support Councillor Rouse's participation in the World Top Performing Incubator Forum, WTIF, in Shanghai. The theme of tech-powered innovation incubates the future. Innovation and the startup ecosystem are an important part of the city's economic future. And I really do welcome Councillor Rouse's energy and passion for this particular area, which he brings naturally, given his background prior to being elected a councillor, but also through his portfolio responsibilities as well. So I think it's a real honour that he has been selected to participate in this forum, and it's another illustration of the city's leadership in this space. I do note that the event organisers will cover the airfares and a portion of the accommodation costs. There is some additional funding which is allowed here as a way of an allowance if required, and that's up to a value of $900. I do thank Councillor Rouse, even though he's not here, for all he does in the innovation space. And indeed, we're hoping that he will help bring Melbourne its next billion-dollar unicorn. Over to you, Councillor Phil Leilu.
Thank you. Happy to support this travel with Councillor Rouse, mainly given that his portfolio and also his past work in the area. I look forward to his insightful insights that he will bring back, but also to get an idea of also any other opportunities that Melbourne and City of Melbourne and also in Melbourne that we can actually play in regards to this.
All right, thank you, Councillor Leilu. Councillor Camilla, do you wish to speak on? Did any other councillors like to speak to this item? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. Councillor Guest.
Lord Mayor, look, I'm going to make some brief comments, and it applies to all the travel, and I don't intend to say it for every particular travel motion. A couple of months ago, when this trip first came up, I asked 3 questions, and to date, we still haven't got clear and concise answers. We don't know. We haven't been informed which executives are going and how much they'll cost.
There are no Alison, are there any executives travelling on this trip?
I can confirm. It applies to all the travel in general. Again, it's a call for transparency. Civic delegations, who's going and how much they'll cost, as well as clearly identifiable goals. I think, in a time when we haven't been able to lock in the rates freeze, we haven't made a large song and dance, if you like, about the emergency services levy. These are the things that concern the residents of Melbourne and the ratepayers, and I think we should be giving that consideration, especially if we haven't been able to cross the bar of transparency on this travel. I do hope to be able to say more positive things about the travel next year, if I can see delivery, but we haven't really been told what we're looking for. We haven't been sort of shown why the Melbourne City Council can be effective here where the state government and the federal government are also active. So I'll be abstaining from the next sort of series of motions, and that's my reason. I don't want to go over it over and over again for each one, so I will just leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Councillor Guest. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Ball, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Liu, Councillor Scott, Councillor Griffiths. Any councillors against? Councillor abstaining, Councillor Guest. The motion is passed. Please ask Councillor Andrew Rouse to return to the council chamber. All right, welcome back, Councillor Rouse. We now move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 6.6, City of Melbourne North Asia Business Mission Update. And so there was a request that this item come back to Council, and which it is now doing. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this agenda item? Councillor Phil Leilu.
Fine. I'd like to declare I have is a general conflict because I'm named in the report, even though the report has already been approved and just representing council. I thought we would be addendant, but anyway, I'm declaring.
All right, thank you for that, Councillor Leilu. Would council like a presentation in relation to this item? No. In that case, I am going to... Sorry, David, it's just saying here a recommendation from manager split and dealt with in 2 parts. Is that still the case? All right, can we put the motion up on the screen, please, Elizabeth? All right, so it's going to be dealt with in 2 parts. So would a councillor like to... Yeah, I don't believe this does need to be moved in 2 parts. So why don't we just move it as a single motion? That we just because we're simply noting, and then approving. Yeah, that's it. Because there's the change to Councillor Leilu's program, hence why he has excused himself.
Lord Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Camillo.
Should you add that this will be at lower cost than before, just for transparency?
We can mention that in debate, Councillor.
Not in here, okay. I thought it would be good to add that.
Yep, that can come out in debate. All right. I'm looking for a councillor to move the motion that is before us. Thank you, Councillor Louis, and looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Liu. Back to you, Councillor Louis.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I think the report and the itinerary is pretty self-explanatory, very detailed in the day-to-day activities, the meetings, the engagements. I think the most important report will be the travel report that comes back to committee after 60 days after the return of the mission. I think that one there will outline the economic returns, the actual engagements, the actual meetings, and if nothing, the photographic documentation of the whole mission as well. And I, sorry, I understand that there is the list of the delegates coming. Sorry, I'm just looking at and there's also the list of the MOUs that will be signed in the different cities from Chengdu, Nanjing, and Tianjin. There will be also the other sorry. Yes. Oh, and also the engagements out of Beijing as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Louis. Over to you, Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to second this motion, and I also want to acknowledge all the work that Mark and his team has been doing, because when you look at the itinerary, it's no easy job at all. We are going to 6 cities, and every day it's jam-packed with different activities for us, for the delegates, and also from there. And then why we are doing this, because we want to take the initiative to go and sell Melbourne and let people know what Melbourne is about, and let people know that Melbourne is the place to do business. So we are here to bring businesses back to Melbourne. And I also want to acknowledge Councillor Philip Lelou's proposal to go to Shenzhen. Now, Shenzhen is a fast-growing city in China. Even though the city of Melbourne hasn't had any formal relationship with Shenzhen, I think this is a great opportunity to start something. So I fully support his visit to Shenzhen to meet with the city government there to explore opportunities. And this will only be good to foster exchange between cities and develop investment and trade, and that is good for businesses in Melbourne. So I am very happy to second this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gladys Liu. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? No, Councillor Griffiths.
Just really quickly on this one, Lord Mayor, as you will note, I voted against some of these motions to do with this particular trip last time it was around, and I continue to have some concerns along the lines of some of the matters that were raised tonight by Councillor Louis about the MOUs that are going to be signed and what that might involve, and the delegate list. I'd like to see that level of detail before voting on this, so I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Ball, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Liu and Councillor Scott. All those opposed, all those abstaining, Councillor Griffiths and Councillor Guest. That motion is passed. Please invite Councillor Philip Liu to return to the council chamber. All right, we move on to our next agenda item, which is proposed travel to the C40 World Mayors Summit and COP30 and Bloomberg Philanthropies Local Leaders Forum, 3rd to the 5th of November 2025. I believe I have a conflict in relation to this item, so I will vacate the chair.
Lord Mayor, I also have a conflict because I have received a campaign donation from you.
I also have a conflict due to an electoral donation.
I do need to declare a conflict due to electoral donations also.
Can I suggest, in the absence of a chair, I would like to nominate Councillor Lee Liu to be the chair for this item. Can I have a seconder to that proposal? Councillor Camillo, thank you very much. All those in favour of Councillor Lee Liu becoming the chair for this item, I'll take declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Lee Liu.
Cool, thank you. So this is agenda item 6.7, proposed travel by the Lord Mayor, C40 World Mayor Summit and COP30 and Bloomberg Philanthropy Local Leaders Forums, 3rd to 5th of November 2025. Will Council like a presentation on this agenda items? No? Okay. I'm happy to, I now call on Chris Thrum, who requested the opportunity to address the committee in relation to this matter, to speak for no more than 3 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Philip Liliou, Chair. Councillors, Sydney Melbourne Magin team, viewers, looking at agenda item 6.7, the proposed travel by the Lord Mayor to the C40 World Mayors Summit and Conference in Rio de Janeiro, the COP30 and the Bloomberg Philanthropies Local Leaders Forum in November 2025, around about the time that the Melbourne Cup's on. I'd like to thank Kate Henderson, the United Nations Sustainability Goals Lead for the City of Melbourne. I'd like to thank Krista Milne, the Director of Climate Change and City Resilience, and also to Mr. Evan Council, the General Manager for Strategy, Policy and Climate Change, for the work that they've put forward for the report here. And this is, I support the recommendations from the management. It's really important that we have a continued relationship with Bloomberg Philanthropies. I'd like to thank Bloomberg Philanthropies as well. I'd like to thank Michael Bloomberg for the vision and the direction that they have in regards to addressing climate change. The background to this is 8 years ago, there was a precedent. The then Lord Mayor Robert Doyle attended the similar meeting in 2017 in New York City, and he made some tremendous observations at the meeting in regards to climate. City of Melbourne showed true climate leadership on a global stage then in 2017, and it helped establish a strong relationship with Bloomberg Philanthropies. And at the C40 meeting, it's like Lord Mayor Robert Doyle got a lot of insight and wisdom into the approach, and it helped shape and tailor the policies and future directions of the City of Melbourne. As a transcript of Lord Mayor Doyle's speech at the time, he said, "The City of Melbourne is fully committed to meet its pledge to limit global temperature by delivering the Paris Agreement. We recently introduced science-based targets aligned to the Paris Agreement for our own operations, and now we're working with C40 to deliver a world-leading climate action plan for our municipality. We have been a certified carbon neutral organisation since 2012, and we're working with our supply chain to reduce emissions as well. We will continue to take bold action on climate change adaptation and reduce manifest greenhouse gas emissions by prioritising energy efficiency and reusable energy." So we've got a tradition of being there, and I think Lord Mayor Nick Rees should go there again to learn even more and to fine-tune our approach to mitigating climate change.
Thank you. Chris? Okay, so given that there is no other speakers, I'm happy to move this motion and looking for a seconder. Yeah.
You move.
I'm happy to move or second or speak to it, whichever works.
I'm sorry. Is there a councillor who would like to move the motion? Councillor Griffiths. I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Ball. Councillor Griffith, would you like to speak to it?
I certainly would, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. This is a piece of travel that I'm particularly passionate about because it relates to some very important issues within the portfolio that I hold, but also some excellent opportunities for the City of Melbourne. Thank you to Chris for his submission, which sets out very neatly the long history that the City of Melbourne has around COP and the C40 processes, and it is very much worth remembering that that is a space that we have been leaders in for a very long time, and something that is of even more vital importance as we see national governments stepping back from some of the responsibilities that they should be taking around climate change and climate mitigation, but we see cities occupying a more and more important space in these kinds of discussions right around the world. And as I said, Melbourne has been a long time a leader in this area, and I think it's important that our Lord Mayor travels to Brazil this year to maintain that long-standing tradition of us advocating for important changes. But as the paper that's before us sets out, and I thank the officers who've spent the time in drawing all of this information together, not only is there some important work to be done at the meetings this year that the Lord Mayor would go to, but also the opportunities if the COP next year is to go to Adelaide, which is one of the things which is a possibility, then that also opens up a very large number of opportunities for the City of Melbourne around surrounding events, and to have the Lord Mayor in that space this year advocating for the City of Melbourne, I think would be an excellent thing. We know that previous COP attendances have ranged between 20 and 70,000 visitors, and even if it's not Melbourne that receives the COP itself, we know there's a number of lead-up events that Melbourne can show leadership around, and that would bring a major economic outcome to the City of Melbourne. For all of those reasons, I am very, very happy to support the Lord Mayor going on this particular trip.
The seconder would like to speak to it.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Of course, the importance of urgent climate action cannot be overstated, and I won't detail why, as I have done quite recently in the chamber on that theme. I do commend the Lord Mayor for his willingness to go to this, and I thank Bloomberg Philanthropies for recognising that to make these occasions successful, it is extraordinarily helpful to have a major philanthropist such as Mr Bloomberg fund these things to ensure that everyone who needs to be there can afford to get there. And I note, of course, that the Lord Mayor is not proposing to attend COP per se, but these ancillary events prior to it in Rio, where he will meet with hundreds of other mayors and discuss city-level interventions, mitigation and adaptation to climate. So I hope he gets an enormous amount out of it. I would add that I would love to see our officers think about how we can bring COP to Melbourne. We don't need to go there necessarily, and those of us who can't or won't go would benefit from being linked into the Conference of Parties at a community level. It's very possible these days to do this, and I'd love to explore ways between now and November how we can bring COP to Melbourne and get people engaged and informed in that important event. Thank you very much.
Cool. Would there any other councillors like to speak to the motion? Councillor Guess.
Thank you, Philip. Just briefly, as you know, I'm going to abstain from these travel motions, but I would just add, as important as climate change may be, its importance can be overstated. if the cost of mitigation and those activities that are needed to bring those environmental issues down outweigh the damage being done, then of course it is being overstated. I think any of these issues need to be discussed in a balanced way. That's all I'm calling for here.
Any other speakers? No? Sure, Councillor Camelo.
I'm just because I'm from Brazil and originally, and I just think Lord Mayor is going to go the first time. I think probably it's going to be one of the first times that someone from the city of Melbourne visit him there. And I would like to send a message to all the Brazilian people receive the Lord Mayor very well on my behalf. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Councillor Camelo. Would any other councillors like to speak to it? No? If that's the case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Liu, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Camelo. All those against? And I take it for the fact that Councillor Guest didn't vote, is abstaining, which is default no in that thing. And the motion is carried. And now I ask the team to bring back all those councillors who are conflicted.
All right, we move on to agenda item 6.5, City of Melbourne Business Mission to India from 16 to 23rd November. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? Take that as a no. In that case, now there are several parts to this motion as I understand it. The first motion that will come before councillors is to debate whether or not the City of Melbourne should support a delegation travelling to India as part of a business mission. And then there'll be successive motions that come after that to then support which councillors should travel as part of that business mission. So the first item before us is that the City of Melbourne supports the business mission to India. And there is a motion there that has been put on the screen. We are now going to, I'm now going to look to a councillor to move this motion. Councillor? Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I will move this motion. I'm looking for a councillor to second it. Councillor Phil Leilu. Okay, thank you, Phil. I will now speak to this item. Apologies, I thought you were going to move it, Kevin Louis, given your portfolio responsibilities around international engagement. But I am actually very happy to emphatically support the motion that is before us on this item. Let me start with a fact that, frankly, I'm a bit embarrassed about. The City of Melbourne has not sent a delegation to India in an official capacity in over 20 years. And indeed, the Lord Mayor has not travelled to India in over 20 years. So, let that just sink in for a moment. People of Indian cultural descent are the fastest growing diaspora in Australia, and Melbourne is home to Australia's largest Indian diaspora. And 40% of those migrants between 2011 and 21 settled in Victoria, and now close to 6% of Greater Melbourne identify as having Indian ancestry. Indeed, we have increased our ties to India over the past few decades on many fronts, but the truth is we could and should be doing a lot better than we are. If you take our forthcoming mission to North Asia as an example, this is a market that we have forged and nurtured strong relationships in, and those relationships are bearing fruit for Melbourne. We are extraordinarily better off, more prosperous and more connected and more internationally engaged, more interesting and vibrant because of those connections which have been made in North Asia. Now it's time to invest in the same time and energy in the Indian community and South Asia with a mission like this one. Let me also note that when it comes to nurturing international relationships, that remains something that is very important to the City of Melbourne. The City of Melbourne has received 77 international delegations in the last 2 years, including mayors, vice mayors, corporate leaders, civic leaders. Indeed, it's almost not a week goes past when there's not a major international delegation coming here to Melbourne Town Hall to learn from our city and to foster better relations between Melbourne and their city, their country and the world. And we are better as a city because of those connections and because of us growing those relationships. But like any relationship, it is a two-way street, and we need to return the courtesy by engaging with global cities and partners in their home countries. And this mission will do just that with our fastest growing diaspora group, the Indian community, and one of the fastest growing business investment and business relationship connections there with the Indian community. So, as a city, Melbourne needs to move on from the COVID years. We need to get out there. We need to get out there and win new investment and valuable connections for Melbourne. We have always been an internationally connected city. It defines us as a city, and it's time for us to get on with it and get out there and get the job done for Melbourne. This mission will position Melbourne as a competitive global city for business and talent. We've got a brilliant story to tell the world, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Councillor Philip Leilu.
I'm happy to support this. I think it's quite important given that the Indian community is first or second biggest diaspora in Melbourne, and also the contribution they have made to this great city. I think it's important that we have built that. I think it's important to build that international relationship, and the fact that India is a global powerhouse, the fact that they are still growing, and also the many states that they expertise that they can bring to not only Australia, but also the fact that there are so many Indian international students here who have called their home, and I think that linkage is quite important. So I think it's important that the City of Melbourne travels to India to actually start building that connection.
Thank you, Councillor Leilu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin by thanking the mover and the seconder for their remarks. What strikes me when you say, Lord Mayor, that it's been 20 years since we engaged with India is how much has occurred in that time. India is now the world's fourth largest economy, and over the course of this council term, it is set to become the third largest. And I want the City of Melbourne to get its fair share of that. Its fair share of that investment, its fair share of those relationships, and the idea that we would spend this council term with one hand behind our back by refusing to engage internationally, by refusing to secure investment, by refusing to secure headquarters, I think would do an incredible disservice to our municipal community and to every ratepayer. Because I haven't met a single constituent of the City of Melbourne who says they wouldn't like to see more investment, more jobs, and an opportunity to seize those global relationships. Now, I look at what has been achieved by other levels of government visiting India. Investment, headquarters, and particularly India now and Melbourne, and the links there. That emphasis on tech and innovation, education and sport. There are so many reasons why we are perfectly positioned more than any other city in Australia to seize those opportunities and that investment. And for my part, I'm not going to leave it up to the state government or the national government to do that. I want Melbourne to get its share because we are the best positioned city to seize those opportunities. I think this is an excellent opportunity, a long overdue opportunity. And for my part, I think to those councillors who are hesitating to vote for this motion, that is a vote for Melbourne to be a second-class city with its hand tied behind its back that is not seizing the economic prosperity, the jobs and investment that is ours for the taking.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And as the portfolio lead for innovation and education, there are some things here that I am quite excited to see covered in the report, specifically the Bengaluru Tech Summit. A couple of weeks ago, Deputy Lord Mayor and I met with the Digital Public Infrastructure team who came over, and it was quite evident from the conversation there was so much that we can be learning from the City of Bengaluru and how they have approached digital public infrastructure and the efficiency gains that we can learn from them. And of course, the Didac Education Trade Fair, positioning Melbourne as Australia's #1 education city and certainly a global hub for international students. We are very well known as being Australia's top city for international students, and ensuring we're seizing that opportunity as well. And also ensuring that the Indian diaspora and alumni networks will be driving co-investment and collaboration back here within Melbourne. If we don't act now, my concern is we risk falling behind other global cities already seizing on India's scale, speed, and from my point of view, most importantly, appetite for innovation as well. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Would any other councillors like to speak to this motion? I quickly exercise my right of reply and say in recent months I've had the opportunity to participate in some of the Indian Chamber of Commerce events here in Melbourne and visit the offices of Indian businesses investing in our city. And so when you go to the offices of Infosys in Docklands or First Source there on Exhibition Street and see the way, in the case of First Source, they are taking up floor after floor of what used to be the Telstra building and now filling it with software engineers doing world-leading tech work here in our city, you really get a sense of the scale of the prospects that growing Indian economy presents to Melbourne. And indeed, I think this needs to be said, the Trump administration in the US is really shaking up the way that global trade is working. And it's fair to say that there has been quite a deterioration in relations between India and the United States. And this is having real consequences. You know, Indian international student applications from India to the US are down 25%. Business visa applications from India to the US are down by a similar amount. Now, those bright minds, those young people from India who are no longer travelling to the US, they are still looking abroad. They are people full of optimism and looking for new opportunities. Places like Australia are a great place for them to come and hold great promise for us as a prosperous, to continue on as a prosperous city. So there is huge potential in this mission. Indeed, I think it will be one of the most exciting that the City of Melbourne has ever undertaken. We are at an exciting moment in history, and it's important that the City of Melbourne seize the moment. All right. On that note, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Leilu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Camillo. All those against, all those abstaining, Councillor Guest. All right, we now move on to I declare that carried. I now move on to the next motion, which will identify councillors that we'll have a vote on whether they join the delegation. So I'm going to suggest that, what's the best way to do this, Dave? What's the best order to go? Start with myself. All right, well, I'll start with myself and put that Councillor Nicholas Rees participate in the mission to India. Under our new process, we're going to separate these. And given that my name is going up on the screen under our new protocols at the City of Melbourne, I have a conflict, so I will excuse myself from this debate.
I also have a conflict because I've received a campaign donation from the Lord Mayor.
I also have a conflict as I received a donation from the Lord Mayor.
So I too need to declare a conflict due to campaign donations.
Good.
The chair being vacated, I would like to nominate Councillor Lee Liu as our acting chair. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Liu, thank you very much. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Lee Liu.
Awesome. So this is nominations for motions. I can't even remember what the whole thing is. Subsequent mention to nominate councillor participation, and it is no, and I'm happy to move that motion up there. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Camello. I'm not really going to speak to it because the Lord Mayor's already speaking to it. Would any other speakers anybody would like to speak to it? Councillor Griffiths?
Just very briefly, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the Lord Mayor going. I can see some value in that because, of course, he brings a very high profile to events that he does. Depending on how many more of these motions we consider tonight, I'll consider carefully how we go through each one of those because I think it's important to consider how big a delegation we need in terms of councillors, which fits with what I was saying about one of the previous motions.
Of course, Councillor Griffiths. Would any other councillors like to speak to the motion?
Philip, yes, very quick.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
I should have put you first. Sorry. Councillor Camilo.
I just want to remind the public again, this is not a holiday. As I mentioned before, as a councillor, I promise to the constituents and everyone in here that I will keep my eye closed. That I think is important. Since day one, we have been discussed that to have these visits and this participation and showing that Melbourne is open for business, not only here locally, but internationally, and that's why I'm supporting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Camelo. Would any other speakers, councillors like to speak to this motion? No? If that's the case, I'd like to put the motion to the vote. All those in support, raise your hands. And that is carried unanimously. Sorry. Can I invite the conflicted councillors back?
All right, we move on to what I believe is motion 3 now as part of this package of motions around the India business delegation. And I'm going to request that Councillor Rashina Campbell, Deputy Lord Mayor, Rashina Campbell's name be put up on the screen.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am going to declare a conflict because I stand to receive a benefit as the subject of the travel of this motion.
I'll wait till the Deputy Lord Mayor has left the chamber, and I am now very happy to move this motion on the screen. Councillor Phil Leilu is seconding. I have nothing to add other, actually, than to say that terrific to see that the Deputy Lord Mayor will be coming as part of this delegation. Indeed, Rashina Campbell has an Indian cultural background. I believe she's the first person of Hindu in Indian cultural background to have been elected as a councillor here at the City of Melbourne and indeed to serve as the Deputy Lord Mayor. And I actually think our multiculturalism as a city is a superpower that Melbourne has when it comes to engaging with the world. With the North Asia mission coming up, the fact that we've got 3 people with Chinese cultural background going to China is amazing that we can do that. And again, it means that we can deliver more successes and more positive outcomes for our city, given the diversity of perspectives and connections that we have with the world. So, delighted that, I look forward to emphatically endorsing Deputy Lord Mayor Rashina Campbell joining us on this delegation. Councillor Phil Leilu, nothing to add. Anyone else want to speak to this item? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Lei-Lu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Camillo. That motion is passed. Can we please ask the Deputy Lord Mayor to please return to the council chamber? And while she's doing that, we might start drafting the next motion to come before us, and I'm going to suggest that Councillor Andrew Rouse's name be included.
Well then, Lord Mayor, I'll declare a conflict of interest, given that I will be the subject of the travel. Sorry, I will be the subject of the travel in question.
All right, thank you, Councillor Rouse. We'll give you a moment to leave the chamber. And I am happy to move this motion that is before us. Looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Phil Lei-Lu. I'm delighted that Andrew Rouse is subject to the support of councillors, will participate in this mission. One of the conferences that we will be attending in India is a huge, gargantuan education conference. And of course, India is a major source of students to Australia, and I believe our fastest growing source of international students to Australia and to Melbourne. And indeed, I spoke of earlier that there's new opportunities opening up to grow the Indian student market to Melbourne, with Indian students enrolling in lesser numbers in the US. So that presents an opportunity for us here in Melbourne. And obviously Councillor Rouse has the that education portfolio. We're also participating in a major tech summit as well in Bangalore, and indeed with that innovation portfolio and Andrew's, Councillor Rouse's passion in this area, he will be ideally suited to represent Melbourne in those forums, as well as many of the other business meetings that we have scheduled with companies and organisations in the education and tech sectors. Councillor Lei-Lu, did you wish to add anything further on this matter? Any other councillors? Councillor Griffiths.
Can I ask a question, please, Lord Mayor? Obviously, with the way that we're dealing with these one by one, it's difficult to understand the full context that we might be moving. How many councillors we're considering to send? Am I able to ask, is this the last motion on this matter that we're considering tonight, and that we're done at that point?
Because it's a delegation of 3 councillors. Did you wish to speak to the item beyond that question? All right, thank you. Do any other councillors wish to speak to this motion? No, in that case, we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Lei-Lu, Councillor Ball, Councillor Camillo, all those against, all those abstaining, Councillor Guest. That motion is carried. Can we please ask Councillor Rouse to return to the chamber? All right, we move on to the next agenda item, which I believe is agenda item 7.2. It is a notice of motion by myself taking action on vacant, dilapidated, dangerous and unsightly premises. And I would request that the motion which I have drafted be please put on the screen. Can we just scroll down? I'm trying to remember if there was any final tweaks. I don't believe that there was. So I'm going to move that motion, and I am looking for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Phil Lei-Lu. I'll now speak to this item. So look, this motion looks to address a serious problem here in Melbourne, which we have talked about for a long time, and that is the issue of vacant and dilapidated buildings and sites which have been allowed to deteriorate into a dangerous, unsightly and unacceptable state here in our beautiful city. We want to put lazy landlords on notice that they need to clean up their act, or we'll clean it up for you and bill you for the job. It is unacceptable that some buildings in our city have fallen into such disrepair they pose a risk to the community. Sites such as the former Cancer Council building on Rathdown Street and the former Kilkenny Inn on King Street are derelict and dangerous and are in desperate need of redevelopment to unlock their full potential and help beautify our city. We've also seen vacant lots which have been earmarked for development and have had the hoardings go up but sit dormant for years. And in a busy, growing city like Melbourne, where you've got valuable waterfront property, riverfront property, in some of the most busy pedestrian areas of our city, that is unacceptable. We want to see these areas turn from cordoned off, hoarded up grey zones to accessible green zones. Even if it's only on a temporary basis for a year or 2 or 3, that is valuable space that could be accessed by Melburnians to make our livable city even more enjoyable and even more livable. So this motion is deliberately drafted in a broad way, but it also includes some specifics as well. We want the City of Melbourne to give us advice on every tool in the toolbox that we can use to fix this problem. We want to explore every lever that is available to us as a council to turn around these sites and stop the blight on our city. So we want to see these sites cleared up, activated, and if necessary, refurbished or redeveloped as appropriate so that they can contribute to our city. We recognise that redevelopment can be a costly process, but all owners of unused buildings have a responsibility to ensure their building is safe and secure. And I think that we have talked about this for too long here at the City of Melbourne. Now, under this motion, we are taking comprehensive and focused action. Councillor Phil Leilou, invite you to speak, and thank you for your championing of this issue as well as a councillor.
No, thank you, and happy to support this. And even though where we approved the annual plan and we put a lot of the this issue in there, I felt that given that the notice of motion by the Lord Mayor on this matter, I think it's important that we ensure that both the annual plan and also this is actually aligned. I think this is an important part of what we do here at City of Melbourne, and while we're not out there to, I guess, prosecute everyone, but there are sometimes owners of the buildings and sites that just take a little bit too far. And I think the best example is the Cancer Council building, which now has come to a fruition, and given the many work that our team has done and advocacy. But I just wanted to actually clarify very clearly that this norm does not actually go after the ones that people who do it, they abide by, I guess, work with the City of Melbourne to try and actually create something beautiful and to make sure that, the sites are not hazardous, but rather this is more for those who are very outrageously not willing to actually do anything about it. And so I'm happy to support this mainly because, we have, I always thought the Cancer Council building was the only one, but apparently it's not. And there are many others examples of that. And I think this is a great example of why we should then have a look at any other ones, because now that we've got the momentum, we should be looking at those who are making us an eyesore and also hazardous in the City of Melbourne. And so happy to support this, and hopefully this really sends, I guess, a signal to that, while we're not going to be prosecuting everyone, but at the same time, we would hope that if you are going to be doing something in the City of Melbourne, we hope that you will work with us and be fair, but also to the point where take consideration of the people around you, and also the residents and the business, so that we ensure Melbourne is actually a livable place and not one that is actually an eyesore.
Thank you, Councillor Phil Leilu. Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, that's one of the motions that make me happy and make me feel pleased to be here in council. I'm pleased to support this motion before us, Lord Mayor, and I heard loud and clear from many members of our community that's are the kind of things they want to be done. This motion is about cracking down on vacant, unsafe, neglected buildings to help keep Melbourne safe, vibrant, and well cared for. We know that some properties within your municipality have been left to deterioration to such a state that they are in risk of to the community. As a portfolio head of safety and cleaning and deputy infrastructure, I strongly support reviewing these tools we have in place to address this type of derelict buildings. This review will also look at graffiti management for these types of buildings, including faster cleanups and potentially creating art murals to brighten space. And I'm part of the arts portfolio too, so I can marry the both in there, the arts and in safety. Ensuring that we can recover costs from its owners and showing more respect to ratepayers. I look forward to receive the report back on this, and I commend the motion before us tonight, and now the support from you and Councillor Philip Liu, and let's keep in getting the basics right. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo, and thank you for your passion and, dare I say, maniacal focus on cleanliness and safety in our city. And you're right, this motion will help improve things immensely, we hope. Would any other councillor like to speak? Thank you, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you not just for the call and the speaking, but also for the motion that you've brought tonight. It's one that I'm very happy to support, and thank you to the other speakers who've supported it already. I just wanted to point out, as I know we've discussed sometimes in other discussions, that as well as some of those high-profile sites like the ones that you mentioned in your speech around the Cancer Council, the Kilkenny Inn, but this is also an issue that affects some of our suburban high street areas, where shops that go unrenovated, uncared for long periods of time can have a very strong impact on the amenity of those areas and really start to deter local residents from going and shopping and supporting the small businesses that rely on those. And as I think I've said before, I'm thinking of particular instances in Kensington and North Melbourne where that has happened for some period of time. There's other spaces that I walked past in Parkville just today as well. So I hope that when officers are doing this work, they're considering not just those very major sites in the CBD, but also some of the more suburban areas of our municipality to ensure that whatever solution we come up with fits all of those problems.
Yep, brilliant. All right, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, thank you for bringing this notice of motion. As Councillor Camillo has identified, it responds to the concerns of many in our community. And thank you also to Councillor Leilu, who's been a strong and passionate advocate on this issue over many years. To my mind, this motion just makes sense. In a city like ours, a capital city that is starved for open space, that doesn't have the necessary housing, the idea that you have vacant or dilapidated sites that are not being utilised, that space is going to waste, doesn't make sense. I would encourage our officers, if this motion passes tonight, when they look at the levers at our disposal to address this issue, to look at what is done around the world. What do the most vibrant, most efficient cities do to prevent this problem? And I hope if this motion does pass, when they come back to us with their advice about the levers available to us, they will take that global outlook so that we can consider all of the options on the table to really crack down on this issue in the City of Melbourne.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Any other councillors like to speak to this item? In that case, I'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Griffiths, Councillor Scott, Councillor Liu, Councillor Guest, Councillor Louis, Councillor Rees, Councillor Camp. Oh, it's unanimous, sorry. That is carried unanimously. We move on to the next agenda item, and that would be building the suspense. Agenda item 6.3, ACDC public celebration. Would councillors like a presentation in relation to this item? No? All right, well, I'd request that a motion be put on the screen. I was about to break into song there, but I thought better of it. And looking for someone to move the motion which is on the screen. Thank you, Councillor Scott. And looking for a seconder, I will happily second that one. Back to you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's been a very long night, and I think we need to be put in the mood.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Sorry, I apologise, Councillor Scott, and you are right. It is late in the night, and we have a request to submit on this item, and that's from Chris Thrum, one of the best guitar players, musical performers, buskers, and indeed rock dogs of Melbourne.
So you brought Chris to the stand.
And invite Chris to please make his way onto the stage to address us on this item.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and hello to all the rock dogs viewing out there. Thank you for the kind words. I'll start by saying that we're on Wurundjeri country. I respect elders past and present. I do want to sort of echo the sentiment of Councillor Mark Scott there by playing AC/DC's Thunderstruck, magnificent riff there. I do support the AC/DC public celebration. You know, I'd like to thank Wesley Portelli, the head of events strategy and delivery, Gabrielle Odaka, the acting director of Enterprise of Experience Melbourne, and of course Rebecca Skelton, about the chief experience and communications. Thank you for the officers. A lot of work's gone into this report. I'd like to thank the management team and the officers who have reached out to the music industry, to Sony Music as well, to liaise with what's going on. I think this is a tremendous opportunity to celebrate a magnificent band and a magnificent occasion. Earlier today, up at Moonee Valley, at the Moonee Valley Racecourse, there was a celebration for the 50th birthday of Manikato. Manikato was an incredible racehorse, very worthy of being remembered. And AC/DC and their performance of Long Way to the Top is well worth being remembered and celebrated as well. So this is a tremendous opportunity to activate Federation Square and also to AC/DC Lane in regards to an installation. Melbourne is the music capital of Australia, there's no doubt about that. And there was a real buzz and an incredible level of excitement when Robbie Williams was getting presented the keys to the city, and he had a constant performance there. I do remember that day. I remember everyone all around that area was just so thrilled and excited to have such an incredible event occurring in Melbourne. And so hopefully that we can replicate this kind of atmosphere with the dedicated concert in tribute and celebration of the AC/DC performance. This event does celebrate Melbourne's music heritage. It's going to activate Federation Square. It's going to activate the AC/DC lane as well. We should consider extending the time frame to install that AC/DC installation as well. And I think it's important to recognise too that this weekend, Paul Kelly's performing a concert at Rod Laver Arena, and Lucinda Williams is supporting him. And the message was sent to Paul Kelly like, that's a hard act to follow, Paul. But Lucinda did a cover of It's a Long Way to the Top from one of her most recent albums. And it's a tremendous song, universally recognised. And I think the City of Melbourne is on an absolute winner by selecting this song in this moment to celebrate, to confirm that Melbourne is the music capital of Australia.
Thank you, Rock Dog. What a great contribution. All right, now back to where we were before. Was a motion before us looking for a mover. Councillor Scott, I'm happy to second it. Back to you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to move this notice of motion tonight, which celebrates AC/DC's extraordinary and iconic cultural legacy and sets out two very exciting and achievable ways for Melbourne to honour it. As we know, in February 1976, for those that can remember like me, AC/DC filmed Its Long Way to the Top right here on Swanston Street. That film clip didn't just immortalise our city on the world stage, it really did help cement Melbourne's identity, as Honorary Councillor Thrum says, as Australia's live music capital. Next year marks the 50th anniversary of that moment, coinciding with the band's Power Up international tour and 2 100,000 people sold out MCG shows in November. The recommendation before us tonight proposes 2 key activations. First, a free public concert at Federation Square, supported by Birrarung Mara as an overflow site. This will showcase a high-profile tribute act to be announced shortly, attract thousands of fans and generate an estimated 1.5 million in economic benefit to our hospitality, transport and retail sectors. Secondly, a permanent lighting installation in ACDC Lane, delivering a lasting legacy in one of our most iconic laneways and enhancing its draw as a visitor destination for the city. Now to the important part, the finances. The Federation Square concert is being scoped in partnership with the state government's Melbourne Arts Precinct Corporation, otherwise known as MAPCO. Costs will cover essential infrastructure such as crowd management, road protection and emergency access planning. Negotiations are already underway to ensure a cost-effective and safe delivery of this occasion. The ACDC Lane installation budget will cover design, fabrication and installation. Again, we will actively pursue corporate partnerships and co-investment opportunities to reduce the cost to council. To support both initiatives, management is seeking approval of up to $110,000. This is a prudent investment. It leverages state government and corporate contributions, offsets risk and unlocks major cultural and economic returns for Melbourne. My council colleagues, I just would like to finish by saying AC/DC are not just another rock band. They are one of Australia's most successful global exports, and their story is Melbourne's story. These proposals are realistic, responsible and deliverable, and they will help showcase our city to the world in November and again in February 2026. So let's endorse these celebrations and show the world that when Melbourne does AC/DC, we don't just turn up the volume, we truly leave people thunderstruck. I commend this motion to council.
I was waiting for it. Thank you, Councillor Scott, for that powerful address. Delighted to be seconding this motion. And as we all know, AC/DC are set to light up this city in November as part of their Power Up World Tour. They have sold out 2 MCG concerts. It is going to be massive. I think not since Taylor Swift have we seen a concert experience on this scale. It is going to be absolutely huge. And as all Melbournians know, it is only right that we celebrate the return of Australia's greatest ever rock export to their spiritual home, Melbourne. I do note that there have been a number of other councils around Australia in recent times trying to put claims out about AC/DC. I see a council in Sydney, Burwood Council, have this week announced that as part of the November AC/DC tour, they plan to rename one of their squares AC/DC Square, to which, of course, we in Melbourne say, what a bunch of Johnny-come-latelys. Have they not visited AC/DC Lane here in our city? Or indeed in Melville Council in Perth, who also try to lay claim to AC/DC. They are planning to rename a street Bon Scott Boulevard. Well, again, we all know the spiritual home of AC/DC is here in Melbourne, where they lived through the mid-1970s and, of course, where they first took off as a rock and roll band. As Councillor Scott has outlined, this motion before us will see the City of Melbourne get behind, in partnership with others around the city, some really exciting events. while ACDC are here. We have some very exciting plans in the pipeline, and we'll be sharing further details very soon. But there will be a very special performance at Federation Square. We'll also be lighting up the city in ACDC Lane, and as I said, other exciting things to come. So I think it's fair to say that here at the City of Melbourne, we are all about roads, rates, rubbish, and rock and roll. Thank you very much. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? Councillor David Griffiths, of course.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not sure why I got the of course there, but I do remember being out on the streets with you when Iron Maiden was in town last year, and we had some fun that day. It's great to be able to speak to this motion and to be able to speak in favour of it. And I did pick up particularly on what the mover, Councillor Scott, said about this being a very responsible and wise investment, and I think that I would echo those words. There were all sorts of levels that we could have gone to in what we could have done, but I think where we've landed on this is a very sensible outcome and one that can be supported, I hope, by all councillors tonight. It's as I noted last time I spoke on this matter, I attended ACDC's last concert in Melbourne some 10 years ago. Me and all of my street ruffian friends went along and were part of that, so it's great to be able to support that. But I know I've also shared with councillors my thoughts on the final concert of the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne. And the reason I raise that is because at his last concert in Birmingham, he raised over $190 million US. And he donated that money, along with Black Sabbath, the band, to the Birmingham Children's Hospital and other local charities. And I would encourage heavy metal bands to think not what your local government council area can do for you, but what you can do for your local government area. I'm sure ACDC are watching along to the Melbourne City Council tonight, and hopefully they get the message that by picking up on things like Ozzy Osbourne has done, or what many other bands have done, there's a contribution they can make back to the city that fostered them and supported them, and that would be great to see. And yes, Chris, I said Street Ruffian because that was the winner of the 1990 Manikato Stakes, so I worked that one in just for you.
Yes, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, for that contribution. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? Councillor Camillo.
Lord Mayor, do you have any idea when is going to be the date of the big event? Or are we allowed to tell to the public?
I think those details are still being worked through, Councillor Camillo.
Thank you.
But the world will know. All right. Any other councillors wish to speak to this item? In that case, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour. I'm going to start at this end this time, just for a change. Councillor Camillo, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Ball, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Rees, Councillor Louis, Councillor Guest. It's unanimous. Sorry. Wow. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. We move on to our next item, which is an item of urgent business. I believe, do we first need to move a motion about the status of the item as urgent business, David? I believe we do. All right. Councillor Rouse, do you wish to move a motion on this item before us?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor.
All right. And do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Scott. Back to you, Councillor Rouse.
Just confirming that this is to debate the validity of the motion being urgent business. That is correct?
That is right. And it's a procedural motion, and it relates to a motion that then relates to the violence we witnessed in the Melbourne CBD on the weekend.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lord Mayor. For those of you still watching at home and those of you still in the room in front of us, for an item to be considered urgent business, it needs to fulfil two criteria. It is my strong belief it fulfills both criteria required here of urgent business, given that the violence was perpetrated after the agenda for this meeting was released. And waiting until our next meeting will mean that any condemnation of violence or assuredness that the community may benefit from as a result of said condemnation will only occur after 2 weeks after the disappointing events, effectively nullifying any positive impact or opportunity for the City of Melbourne to be proactive. Thus, by definition, cannot be conveniently deferred.
All right, thank you for that. Do you wish to speak as seconder, Councillor Scott? Okay, as it is a procedural motion, then under Rule 37.3, there will be no debate. So I'll put that matter to the vote. This is on the procedural motion. All those in favour of being treated as urgent business, declaring that carried unanimously. So we now move on to the substantive motion, which I would request please be put on the screen. That is your handiwork there. Councillor Rouse, are you going to... I'll take that as moved. And do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Scott. Back to you. We're now on to the substantive motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And there's been a lot said about the actions on the weekend. As the grandson of Holocaust survivors, the son of a law enforcement officer, but most importantly, as a Melburnian, I have never been so embarrassed and ashamed witnessing the actions occurring on our streets on Sunday. This is an intentional attempt to divide and promote hate, and this must not be allowed to succeed. And to that end, all efforts must be made. Now, this motion is put forward in the context of the council plan currently out for consultation. The motion before us does not seek to comment on the right to assembly or the right to free speech. It does not seek to validate or invalidate any individual's reasons or believed reasons as to why they were protesting. It does not seek to apportion relative blame between groups involved, does not comment on what City of Melbourne's role should or should not be in current or future protests, and does not seek to comment on international or federal issues. What this motion does is simply say, if you come to the city with violent intent, you are not welcome. If you want to throw rocks or glass bottles here in the city, you are not welcome. If you want to throw bottles of urine or golf balls, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and display symbols of domestic or foreign terrorism, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and destroy council property, or any property for that matter, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and graffiti public works of art, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and cause tourists to shelter in storefronts and in place and calm their crying children to try and explain that the mob out the front are not trying to harm them, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and hurl racist abuse at the public, as we heard earlier from Ed's submission, you are not welcome. If you want to come into the city and violently attack a police officer or cause City of Melbourne staff to be injured, you are not welcome. If you are coming into the city to call for the killing of other people, you are not welcome. If you come into the city to tell Australian citizens or any other member of the public to go back from where you came from, you are not welcome. If you come into the city to use language that in the AFL will get you an automatic 5-week suspension, you are not welcome. And if you come into the city with the intent to cause aggressive destruction or injury to others, you are not welcome. The motion before us is an opportunity for Council to stand united in condemnation of the disgusting violence on our own streets that we witnessed on Sunday. I commend this motion to my councillor colleagues. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am compelled to second this motion tonight because what we witnessed on Sunday was not only an attack on police and public order, but a completely unacceptable disruption that cut to the heart of our municipality, our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. As councillors, we have a legislative responsibility to govern for the entire municipality. That responsibility is paramount, and it means ensuring that every decision we make protects the well-being of the people and places that make up the great city of Melbourne. Violence, intimidation, significant economic impact and property damage undermine that responsibility. Our businesses, from independent retailers and family-run cafes to major retailers employing hundreds of people on a single day, bore the brunt of Sunday's disruption. Many were forced to close their doors or hire additional security. But the impact goes further. The confrontational environment kept people away from the CBD, and the result is measured not just in inconvenience, but in millions of dollars in lost sales. For small operators, especially those lost trading opportunities, it can be the difference between viability and closure in an already tough business climate. For residents, the sight of violence on their streets is deeply unsettling. People deserve to feel safe in their homes and neighbourhoods. And for visitors, whether they are tourists or students or families coming in from across Victoria or Australia, these events leave damaging and lasting impressions that threaten Melbourne's reputation as a safe and welcoming city. Melbourne's strength truly lies in its diversity, its mutual respect, and its shared commitment to peaceful community life. Violence and hate have no place here. By supporting this motion, we reaffirm our duty to govern for the whole municipality and send a clear message that we stand with our residents, our businesses, and our visitors in protecting a city that is safe, inclusive, and cohesive. I commend Councillor Rouse for his passion and commitment to the city in bringing this motion before Council, and I'm very, very proud to second this motion.
Thank you very much for those words, Councillor Scott. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? Councillor Raphael Camillo.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, and welcome this motion from Councillor Rouse and Councillor Mark Scott second, but I need just putting some information to the public that's very important that the management has shared with me. So the message was we will continue to promote and respect and tolerance, and we are taking every action to ensure Melbourne remains a safe and a welcome place for everyone. So Victoria Police are actively investigating the events and incidents that occurred on Sunday. Victoria Police has requested safety city cameras footage of incidents to support the investigators, and it's not for councillors or council to recommend what Victoria Police charge people with, as they are well-trained and they expect in this area, supported by a strong prosecutors area. Just to remind the public where we hold our powers. Council plays an important role to support Victoria Police in instances like we saw on the weekend. Our city safety, security and amenity branch assists Victoria Police, including our security team, local laws officers and safe city cameras. Just to clarify that to the public, because we explain and expose our ideas and opinions in here, but this is a factual information that the public needs to know. And to finalize, as a portfolio head for safety and cleaning, of course, I gotta welcome this motion. And I agree that the right to protest peacefully is okay. However, vandalism is never okay. And no Melbourne visitor should ever be prevented from running a business, practicing their faith, or feeling safe when they visit our great city. This is not about taking sides in any of the current protests, but instead about reinstating a balance that allows Melbourne to prosper while remaining safe, inclusive for all. I commend the great work by Victoria Police and our safety team on the weekend and deplore the actions taken by some. As I said previously tonight, we will continue to work supporting VicPol to do whatever we can do to bring offenders to account. But, as I always says, action, not words. So once again, I call on the need for a better framework for protests, as I stated 2 weeks ago, as a part of the council plan, seeking a safer and cohesive Melbourne. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camillo. Would any other councillor like to be? Councillor Gladys Liu.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, obviously, I will support this motion because violence, intimidation, racism, hatred, and all these behaviours need to be condemned. And definitely will reaffirm our commitment, the City of Melbourne's commitment to ensuring the safety of this city. And I just wanted to make sure everyone knows we are not here to pay lip service. We are not here to say, people, you're not welcome if you causing violence, intimidation, racism, and then hatred. We actually take action. And of course, we know that as council, we can't do and tell people whether they can protest here or not. And it is the state government. And what we can do is advocate for you to tell the state government, let's do something. Because people are sick and tired of all these antisocial behaviors and sick of all this violence. And the state government has to do something. And thanks to the head of safety and cleanliness, my colleague, Councillor Raphael Camillo, 2 weeks ago, he moved an amendment to our council plan, and that's action, and that's what we are doing. And that's what we are going to look into the framework of protests. And we are going to advocate for you to the state government. And we are here saying it loud and clear that people have enough of that. So the state government, we are here to tell you what the people are telling us, that we need to, or you, the state government, need to do something to keep people safe.
Thank you for that, Councillor Liu. Would any other councillors like to speak to this item? I've said a lot about this publicly, so I don't propose to add to it in this chamber at this late hour, other than to say I strongly support the sentiment of what's been put before us this evening. And thank you, Councillor Rouse, Councillor Scott and Councillor Camillo as well, for I know the work you did in putting together this motion. If there's no other speakers, we will put unless you want to write of reply, Councillor Rouse.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think enough has been said in terms of the motion before us now, but I am excited as a council and as a city to stand united against the actions and behaviour that we saw on Sunday.
Right. All right, we'll put the matter to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'm going to declare that carried unanimously. All right, that concludes urgent business. We now move on to public questions. Any members of the public have any questions of us? No, in that case we move on to the next agenda item, which is closure of the open meeting. I wish to thank members of the public for their interest and attendance and declare this meeting closed at 9:07 p.m. Thank you, one and all.